I'm Sarah Mitchell, 34, a pediatric nurse from Columbus, Ohio, who spent the last decade pouring my heart into caring for other people's children. At last month's family barbecue, my mother's words cut deeper than any scalpel. Sarah, you're being selfish. At your age, you should have given us grandchildren by now. My father nodded in agreement, while my sister Emma smirked from across the patio, bouncing her 2-year-old on her lap. What they didn't know was that I'd been trying for 3 years with my ex-fiancé, enduring miscarriage after miscarriage in silence. What they couldn't have predicted was the phone call that would come just 2 weeks later, the one that would make me a mother overnight, and show them exactly what kind of person I really was. Sometimes the universe has a way of answering our deepest prayers through our greatest tragedies. And sometimes being called selfish is exactly what pushes you to discover just how much love you're capable of giving, if you've ever felt misunderstood by the people who should know you best. This story is for you. The drive home from my parents' house felt longer than usual, every traffic light giving me another moment to replay Mom's words. Sarah, you're being selfish. At your age, you should have given us grandchildren by now. The dashboard clock read 8:47 p.m., and I could still taste the bitter remnants of my father's homemade barbecue sauce mixed with the sourness of disappointment. I pulled into my apartment complex parking lot and sat in my Honda Civic for a moment, watching families in other units through their lit windows. A father helping his daughter with homework at the kitchen table. A mother rocking a baby by the living room window. Normal scenes that felt like glimpses into a life I'd been desperately trying to build for myself. My phone buzzed with a text. From Emma. Mom didn't mean it like that. You know how she gets, but I knew Emma better than that. She'd been sitting right there, saying nothing, while our parents took turns dissecting my life choices. She'd even managed that little smile when Dad added, "Look at Emma, she knew what was important." Walking up the stairs to my second-floor apartment, I thought about Mark. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 2 of them, and during that time we'd tried everything. Fertility specialists, acupuncture, dietary changes, meditation, you name it. 3 pregnancies, 3 heartbreaks. The first miscarriage at 8 weeks, just when we'd started telling people. The second at 12 weeks, after we'd already started planning the nursery. The third at 6 weeks, which somehow hurt the most because I'd been so hopeful, so careful, so sure that this time would be different. Mark had been understanding at first. "We'll keep trying," he'd say, holding me while I cried on the bathroom floor. "It'll happen when it's meant to happen." But after the 3rd loss, something shifted. He started working later, coming home exhausted and distant. He stopped asking about my cycle, stopped suggesting we try again. Our relationship became a careful dance around the elephant in the room, the children we couldn't have and the future we couldn't build. Maybe we should take a break from trying, he'd suggested one evening over dinner, not meeting my eyes. Focus on us for a while. But I could see the truth in his shoulders, the way he'd already started pulling away. 6 months later, he moved. Out. "I need to find myself," he'd said, which was code for, "I need to find someone who can give me what you can't." I never told my family about any of it. Not the trying, not the losing, not the breaking apart. It was easier to let them think I was career-focused, that I was choosing my job over family. Emma had gotten pregnant with her first child on her 2nd month of trying. "It was so easy," she gushed to Mom during one of their weekly phone calls that I'd overheard. "I guess I'm just lucky." Lucky. That was one word for it. My apartment felt especially quiet that night. I decorated it with Care-Soft blues and greens, plenty of plants, a cozy reading nook by the window. It was a home meant for one person, but I always imagined it growing, expanding, filling with the chaos and joy of a family. Instead, it remained perfectly organized, perfectly peaceful, perfectly lonely. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder labeled medical records, documents I'd never shown anyone. Fertility test results, hormone level charts, ultrasound, images of pregnancies that never made it to term. Evidence of 3 years of hope and heartbreak. 3 years of my body failing to do what seemed to come so naturally to everyone else. working as a pediatric nurse have been both a blessing and a curse during those years. Every day, I cared for other people's children, celebrated their recoveries, comforted them through procedures, watched their families love them fiercely. Some days it felt like torture. Other days, it felt like the closest I get to being a mother, and I was grateful for even that doubt my coworkers didn't know about my struggles either. To them, I was the dedicated nurse who picked up extra shifts, who stayed late to comfort a scared child, who always volunteered for the holiday rotations. Sarah doesn't have kids, I'd heard them say, not unkindly, so she doesn't mind working. Christmas. They were right, I didn't mind. Where else would I go? What else did I have? That night, I stood in my spare bedroom, the room I'd once imagined as a nursery. Now it served as a home office, complete with a desk, filing cabinet, and a daybed for when Emma visited with her kids. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in there and imagine what it would have been like. The crib against the far wall, a changing table by the window, toys scattered across the floor. The beautiful chaos of a child's room. I picked up the framed photo on my desk, a picture of Jake, his wife Amy, and their son Tommy from last Christmas. Jake was my younger brother, the middle child who'd somehow managed to stay out of the family drama. He and Amy had moved to Denver for his job when Tommy was 3, and we didn't see them as much as we used to. But whenever they visited, Jake made a point to seek me out to ask how I was really doing. "You'd be an amazing mom," he'd told me during their last visit, watching me help Tommy with a puzzle. "You're so good with kids." I brushed off the compliment, but it had meant more to me than he knew. At least someone in my family saw me as more than just the disappointing daughter who hadn't given them grandchildren. Looking at Tommy's gap-toothed grin in the photo, I wondered if he'd be the only child I'd ever have the chance to help raise, even from a distance. At 7 years old, he was bright and funny, with Jake's sense of humor and Amy's gentle spirit. During their visits, he'd climb into my lap while I read to him. And for those precious moments, I felt like maybe I understood what it meant to be needed by a child. As I finally prepared for bed that night, I made a decision. I was done hiding my pain from my family. The next time they questioned my choices, I would tell them the truth. About the trying, the losing, the breaking apart, of dreams I'd held so carefully in my heart. Maybe then they'd understand that I wasn't selfish. I was just someone who'd wanted to be a mother so desperately that the absence of it had shaped my entire adult life. I had no way of knowing that in just 2 weeks, everything would change. That the phone call I'd been dreading would finally come, but not at all in the way I'd expected. That my chance to be a mother would arrive wrapped in tragedy. And that the family who called me selfish would finally see exactly what I was, capable of when a child needed me most. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant understanding your place in the family hierarchy from an early age. Emma, 3 years older than me, had claimed the top spot before I could even walk. She was the child who did everything right, effortlessly, while I seemed to stumble through life always one step behind. Found the old report cards last month while helping Mom clean out the attic. There they were, side by side in a manila envelope labeled school records, Emma's neat rows of A's and glowing teacher comments, followed by my collection of B's and C's with notes like, "Sarah is a sweet child but needs to apply herself more." Even our childhood achievements had been cataloged and compared, as if our parents were building a case for why one daughter deserved more attention than the other. Emma had been the star of every school play, the captain of the debate team, the valedictorian who earned a full scholarship to Ohio State. I was the kid who forgot her lines during the 3rd grade Christmas pageant and preferred reading in the library to competing for student council positions. Where Emma thrived in the spotlight, I found comfort in the shadows, content to cheer from the sidelines, but it wasn't just about academic achievement. Emma had a gift for reading people, for saying exactly what they wanted to hear. She'd mastered the art of being the perfect daughter-calling mom every Sunday, remembering every birthday, organizing family gatherings with the precision of a military operation. She made it look effortless, this constant performance of daughter perfection, while I struggled to remember to send a card on Mother's Day. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the unofficial family motto. When Emma got engaged to her college sweetheart, David, at 24, Mom spent months planning the wedding, calling it the event of the century. When I dated casually through my 20s, focusing on my nursing career, I was labeled too picky and commitment phobic. Emma's wedding photos still dominated the living room, mantle a shrine to her ability to achieve every milestone at precisely the right time. The grandchildren had been the final triumph in Emma's collection of life achievements. Little Madison arrived just 18 months after the wedding, followed by Connor 2 years later. I'd watched Mom transform into a different person around those babies, softer, more patient, more loving than I'd ever seen her. She'd drive the 45 minutes to Emma's house twice a week, returning with stories about Madison's first words or Connor's latest antics. "Sarah, you should see how natural Emma is with the children," Mom would tell me during our stilted phone conversations. She was born to be a mother. The implication was clear. Emma had fulfilled her biological destiny. While I was still wandering around trying to figure out my purpose, what hurt most wasn't the comparisons themselves. I'd grown used to those over the years. It was the way my family had decided who I was without ever really asking. In their minds, I was the career-focused daughter who'd chosen work over family, the selfish one who preferred her freedom to the responsibilities of motherhood. They'd constructed an entire narrative about my life that bore no resemblance to the truth. Emma had never seemed particularly interested in children before she had her own. During our teenage years, she'd been focused on her grades, her college applications, her future career in marketing. She'd never babysat neighbors' kids or talked about wanting a big family. But once she became a mother, she embraced the role. With the same perfectionism she'd applied to everything else. Her social media feeds became a carefully curated showcase of maternal bliss organic baby food recipes, developmental milestone updates, professional family photos, and coordinated outfits. She'd found her audience and played to it beautifully, collecting likes and comments from admiring friends and family members. "Emma makes motherhood look so easy," was a common refrain, and she'd learned to bask in the praise. Meanwhile, I'd poured my maternal instincts into my work, finding purpose in caring for children who needed medical attention and emotional support. Some of my young patients had been in the hospital for months, and I'd become a familiar face in their scary world. I'd held their hands during procedures, celebrated their small victories, and comforted them when they missed their families. It wasn't the same as being a mother, but it felt like the closest I'd get to using the nurturing skills I'd always possessed. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd chosen a career dedicated to caring for children, while Emma, who'd been blessed with easy pregnancies and healthy babies, seemed to take her role as a mother for granted. She'd complain about sleepless nights and tantrums, posting dramatic status updates about the struggles of motherhood, while I went home to my quiet apartment and wondered what I'd give to have those problems. During family gatherings, I'd watch Emma navigate conversations about parenting with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned her ability to create and sustain life. She'd dispense advice to other mothers, share articles about childhood development, and speak with authority about topics I'd studied extensively in my nursing education, but had never been invited to discuss as someone without children of her own. "You wouldn't understand," had become Emma's go-to response whenever I tried to contribute to conversations about child rearing. "You don't have kids." It was a conversation ender, a way of dismissing my professional expertise and personal insight with a single phrase. The fact that I spent 40 hours a week caring for sick children, that I'd seen families navigate their worst moments, that I'd helped guide parents through impossible decisions. None of that mattered because I didn't have children sleeping in my own home. The worst part was watching my parents buy into Emma's narrative completely. They'd nod along when she talked about the sacrifices of motherhood, as if caring for your own healthy children was somehow more noble than caring for other people's sick ones. They'd praise her for her natural parenting skills while remaining oblivious to the fact that I'd been nurturing children professionally for over a decade. Sometimes I wondered if Emma actually believed her own performance, if she convinced herself that she was inherently better suited for motherhood than I was, or if she knew deep down that she'd simply been lucky or blessed with a body that cooperated, a husband who stayed, a family that celebrated her choices instead of questioning them. But luck I'd learned could change in an instant. And sometimes, the people who seemed to have it all figured out were the ones least prepared when life decided to test their assumptions. Emma had never faced real adversity, never been forced to question her place in the world or fight for something that mattered. She coasted through life on a combination of privilege and timing, never learning the resilience that comes from genuine struggle. I had no way of knowing that this carefully constructed family dynamic was about to be shattered completely. That the phone call coming in just over a week would reveal exactly who we all were when the pretense was stripped away and only love, or the absence of it, remained. The call came on a Tuesday evening while I was making dinner, just pasta with marinara sauce, the kind of simple meal you fix when you're cooking for one. I almost didn't answer when I saw the Colorado area code, thinking it might be a telemarketer. But something made me reach for the phone at the last second, and I'm grateful I did, because it was the last conversation I'd ever have with my brother Jake. "Sarah? Thank God you picked up." His voice was shaking, barely recognizable. "There's been an accident." The wooden spoon I'd been using to stir the sauce clattered to the floor. I knew immediately that whatever he was about to tell me would change everything. Amy and I were driving back from Tommy's soccer game, and this drunk driver ran a red light. He hit us on Amy's side. Jake's words came in fragments, punctuated by the sounds of hospital equipment in the background. "Sarah, Amy's gone. She died on impact." The world tilted sideways. Amy, with her infectious laugh and her gentle way of making everyone feel welcome. Amy, who sent me handwritten birthday cards every year and always asked about my work. Amy, who'd been more of a sister to me than Emma had ever been. "And Jake," I started, but I couldn't finish the question. "I'm not going to make it either." His voice was getting weaker. Internal bleeding. The doctors say maybe a few hours. "Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully." I sank into my kitchen chair, the phone pressed so tightly against my ear that it hurt. "Jake, no, you're going to be okay. You have to be okay. Tommy's with neighbors right now." He wasn't in the car, he was at a sleepover. "But Sarah, I need you to promise me something. The will, it's in our safe deposit box. But I'm telling you now in case there's any confusion. I want you to take care of Tommy, not Mom and Dad, not Emma. You. Jake, you're scaring me. You're going to be fine, and you and Amy are going to raise Tommy together, and Sarah." His voice was firm despite its weakness. "You're the only one who really sees him, the only one who understands what he needs. You remember last Christmas when he had that nightmare?" I did remember. Tommy had woken up crying in the middle of the night, and while everyone else had suggested he just had too much sugar, I'd recognized the signs of anxiety. I'd sat with him in the dark, teaching him breathing exercises I'd learned from working with young patients, helping him calm down without making a big production of it. "You didn't make him feel broken," Jake continued. "You just helped him feel better. That's what he's going to need now. Someone who sees him as a whole person, not a problem to be fixed. Jake, please don't talk like this. You're going to be okay. The will is clear, but I know the family's going to fight you on this. They'll say you're too young, too single, too focused on your career. But Sarah, I've watched you with kids. I've seen how you care for those patients at the hospital. You have the biggest heart of anyone I know, and Tommy's going to need all of that heart." I was crying now, ugly sobs that made it hard to speak. "I can't do this without you. I don't know how to be a mother." "You already are one." "You just haven't had the chance to prove it yet." Jake's voice was fading, and I could hear medical professionals in the background discussing procedures and medications. "Sarah, I need you to promise me. Promise me you'll fight for him. I promise. And Sarah, don't let them convince you that you're not enough. You're exactly what Tommy needs. You're exactly what he's always needed." The line went quiet except for the sound of machines, and then a nurse's voice came on. "Ma'am? I'm sorry, but he's gone." I don't remember hanging up the phone. I don't remember how long I sat in that kitchen chair, staring at the cooling pasta on the stove. I know that at some point, I called my supervisor to request emergency leave. I know that I booked a flight to Denver for the next morning. I know that I spent the night in a strange, Hollow space where nothing felt real and everything felt too real at the same time. Jake was gone. Amy was gone. And somewhere in Denver, a 7-year-old boy was about to learn that his world had ended in the time it took a drunk driver to run a red light. The death certificate arrived by fax at 6 a.m., an official document that reduced 2 beautiful lives to cause of death and time of expiration. I stared at it for a long time, this piece of paper that would now define everything that came after. Jake Mitchell, age 32, died from internal hemorrhaging due to blunt force trauma. Amy Mitchell, age 31, died from traumatic brain injury upon impact. But the document couldn't capture what they'd really been, the way Jake could make anyone laugh, even during their darkest moments. The way Amy had a gift for remembering exactly what mattered to each person in her life. The way they built a home full of love and laughter and dreams for their son's future. I called my parents while I waited for my taxi to the airport. Mom answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting for bad news. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "Mom, I need you to sit down." "It's about Jake and Amy." The sound she made when I told her was unlike anything I'd ever heard from my mother, a keening wail that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her throat. Dad took the phone, his voice thick with disbelief. "What about Tommy?" he asked after I'd explained everything. "Jake wants me to take care of him. It's in his will." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Dad spoke. "Sarah, that's a big responsibility. Are you sure you're ready for something like that?" Even in the midst of grief, even after losing his son, Dad's first instinct was to question my capabilities. But Jake's words were still ringing in my ears. "Don't let them convince you that you're not enough." "I'm sure," I said, and for the first time in years, I meant it completely. The taxi honked outside and I grabbed my hastily packed bag. As the plane lifted off from Columbus, I looked down at the city where I'd spent my entire life being told. What I couldn't do, what I wasn't ready for, what I'd never understand. But somewhere in Denver, a little boy was waiting for someone to love him unconditionally. And Jake had trusted me with that sacred responsibility. I was about to become a mother in the most heartbreaking way possible, and I was ready to fight anyone who tried to stop me. The Denver Department of Human Services building looked like every other government office I'd ever seen fluorescent lights. Linoleum floors and the kind of institutional beige that seemed designed to drain hope from anyone who walked through its doors. I sat in the waiting room, clutching the paperwork that would allow me to take temporary custody of Tommy, trying to prepare myself for a conversation I'd never imagined having Mrs. Rodriguez. The social worker assigned to Tommy's case had kind eyes, but a businesslike demeanor. "Miss Mitchell, I want you to understand that Tommy has been through significant trauma. He's been staying with the neighbors who had him for the sleepover, the Johnsons, but they can only keep him for a few more days. He's going to need professional counseling, and there will be an adjustment period." I nodded, though nothing could have prepared me for the reality of trauma counseling and adjustment periods. My nursing background had given me experience with children in crisis, but those had been other people's children, and there had always been parents to handle the long-term healing. This was different. This was permanent. "Where is he now?" I asked. "He's in the family room with one of our child specialists. Tommy doesn't fully understand what's happened yet. He knows his parents are gone, but I don't think he's processed what that means for his future." She led me down a hallway lined with children's artwork crayon drawings of families holding hands, stick figures standing in front of houses with triangle roofs and sunshine in the corner. Normal childhood scenes that Tommy might never draw again. I saw him before he saw me. He was sitting at a small table, coloring in a Superman coloring book, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. He looked so much like Jake at that. Age, the same unruly brown hair, the same stubborn cowlick that refused to stay down. But there was something different about his posture, a careful stillness that children his age shouldn't have to master. "Tommy?" I said softly. He looked up, and I saw the exact moment recognition hit. His face crumpled, and he dropped his crayon, running straight into my arms with a force that nearly knocked me over. "Aunt Sarah, Mom and Dad are gone. They're really gone." I held him while he cried, feeling the sharp edges of his shoulder blades through his thin t-shirt. He was smaller than I'd remembered, more fragile. 7 years old, but suddenly carrying the weight of an adult's grief. I know, sweetheart, I know. The lady said you're going to take care of me now. Is that true? I pulled back to look at his. Face Jake's eyes, Amy's delicate features, and an expression of hope mixed with terror that broke my heart. Yes, Tommy, if you want me to, I'm going to take care of you. Forever, forever? The social worker stepped forward with a small, worn backpack. Tommy, why don't you show Aunt Sarah what you packed? He unzipped the backpack with the careful precision of a child who'd been forced to become responsible for his own belongings. Inside was a heartbreaking collection of items: 3 days' worth of clothes, a toothbrush, a stuffed elephant named Peanut that I remembered from his infancy, a framed photo of his parents, and a small notebook filled with his drawings. I brought the important stuff, he said, as if he were explaining his choices to someone who might judge them. You did good, Tommy. You brought exactly the right things. We spent the next hour in that sterile family room, filling out paperwork and discussing logistics while Tommy colored beside us. The social worker explained the process for emergency custody, the requirements for permanent guardianship, and the timeline for court hearings. She gave me a list of child therapists in Columbus and a packet of information about helping children process grief. The important thing is stability, she said. Tommy needs to know that his world isn't going to keep changing. He needs routines, boundaries, and most importantly, he needs to know that you're not going anywhere. As we prepared to leave, Tommy carefully packed his backpack again, folding his clothes with the same precision he'd used to unpack them. Watching him, I realized that this small ritual was probably one of the few things he felt he could control in a world that had suddenly become unpredictable. Are we going to your house now? He asked as we walked to the rental car. We're going to fly to my house. Our house. Is that okay? He nodded, but I could see the fear in his eyes. Everything familiar was disappearing: his friends, his school, his room, his life in Denver. I was asking him to trust me with his entire future, and he was 7 years old. The flight back to Columbus was quiet. Tommy sat pressed against the window, watching the ground disappear beneath us. I brought snacks and coloring books, but he seemed more interested in observing everything with the careful attention of someone who'd learned that the world could change without warning. Aunt Sarah? He said as we began our descent. Yes, sweetheart. Do you think Mom and Dad can see us up here? Like, are we closer to heaven? I dealt with children's questions about death before, but never as someone responsible for providing the answers that would shape a child's understanding of loss. I thought about Jake's voice on the phone, trusting me to know what Tommy needed to hear. I think they can see us everywhere, I said finally. And I think they're very proud of how brave you're being. He seemed to consider this. Are you scared? The question caught me off guard. Children weren't supposed to worry about adult fears, but Tommy had been thrust into a world where the adults couldn't protect him from the scariest thing imaginable. A little bit, I admitted, but I'm not scared of taking care of you. I'm just scared of making mistakes. It's okay if you make mistakes, he said with the matter-of-fact wisdom of a child who'd been forced to grow up too fast. Mom and Dad made mistakes too, but they still loved me. As our plane touched down in Columbus, I looked at Tommy Small, hand in mine, and felt the full weight of what I promised Jake. This wasn't just about providing food and shelter. It was about helping a traumatized child learn to trust the world again, about becoming the kind of parent who could hold space for both grief and joy. My apartment, which had felt perfectly sized for one person, suddenly seemed impossibly small. Tommy looked around the space that would now be his home, taking in the adult furniture, the lack of toys, the quiet that had once felt peaceful but now felt empty. Where will I sleep? He asked. I thought you could have the spare room. We can decorate it however you want. He nodded politely, but I could see the exhaustion in his face. It had been the longest day of his young life, and he was running on. Empty. That night, I set up a makeshift bed in my room so he wouldn't have to sleep alone. I lay awake listening to his breathing, punctuated by the occasional whimper or restless movement. At 3 a.m., he woke up crying, and I held him until he fell back asleep. Both of us clutching Peanut the elephant dot in the morning. I would need to figure out schools and doctors and grocery shopping for a child. I would need to learn about car seats and bedtime routines and the thousand other details that make up a child's daily life. But for now, it was enough to know that Tommy was safe, that he wasn't alone, and that somehow, despite all my fears about not being ready, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The first text message arrived while I was making Tommy breakfast scrambled eggs and toast, the kind of simple meal I hoped would feel normal to a child whose entire world had just been turned upside down. My phone buzzed against the kitchen counter and I saw Mom's name on the screen. We need to talk. This is too much responsibility for you to take on alone. I set the phone aside and focused on cutting Tommy's toast into triangles, the way I'd seen Amy do it during their visits. He was sitting at my small dining table, still in his pajamas, looking lost in my adult-sized chairs. "Is this how you like your eggs?" I asked, setting the plate in front of him. He nodded and took a tentative bite. "They're good. Different from Mom's, but good." Another buzz from my phone. This time it was Dad. "We should all sit down and discuss what's best for Tommy. This is a family decision." I ignored it and sat across from Tommy, sipping my coffee while he ate. We were still figuring out the rhythm of meals together, the careful dance of making sure he felt comfortable while establishing some kind of routine dot by noon. My phone had become a constant source of interruption. Emma had started a group text with our parents, and the messages were coming fast and frequent. Emma, "Sarah, I know you want to help, but have you really thought this through? Tommy needs stability, not someone who's never been a parent. Mom, we could take him. Your father and I raised 3 children successfully. Dad, Sarah's apartment isn't suitable for a growing boy. And what about school? Work? She hasn't thought any of this through. Emma, David and I have been talking. We could take Tommy. Madison and Connor would love having a big brother." I watched Tommy playing with his new set of Legos, a purchase from our morning trip to Target, and felt my resolve hardening. They were talking about him like he was a problem to be solved, a burden to be distributed among family members based on who was most convenient. The doorbell rang, and I found Mom and Dad standing in the hallway looking like they'd come to stage an intervention. "We to talk," Mom said, rushing past me into the apartment. Tommy looked up from his Legos as they entered, and I saw him shrink back slightly. He'd always been quieter around my parents, more reserved. During family gatherings, he gravitated toward me and Jake, seeking out the adults who didn't constantly ask him to perform or speak up. "Hello, Tommy," Dad said, his voice artificially cheerful. "How are you holding up, son?" "Okay," Tommy mumbled, not looking up from his building project. Mom sat down on my couch, her posture rigid with the kind of determination I recognized from childhood. "Sarah, we need to discuss the practicalities. You work full-time. You've never been responsible for a child. Your apartment only has 1 bedroom. I'm managing just fine," I said, though we both knew that 2 days didn't constitute proof of anything. "But for how long?" Dad asked. "What happens when he needs help with homework, when he gets sick, when he wants to play sports or have friends over? You can't just wing it when it comes to raising a child." I felt the familiar burn of their doubt, the assumption that I couldn't handle real responsibility. "Jake trusted me with Tommy. That has to count for something." "Jake was dying," Mom said bluntly. "He wasn't thinking clearly. You're a daughter, and we love you, but you have to be realistic about your limitations." Tommy had gone completely still, his hands frozen over his Legos. I realized he was listening to every word, absorbing the adult's assessment of his future like a sponge. "Maybe we should continue this conversation in the kitchen," I suggested. We moved to the small kitchen, but I could still see Tommy from where we stood. He'd abandoned his Legos and was sitting very straight, very still in the way children do when they're trying to become invisible. "Emma and David have a real home," Mom continued, lowering her voice. "A yard, good schools, other children. They know how to be parents. I know how to take care of children too," I said. "I've been doing it professionally for 12 years. That's different. And you know it, Dad said. Taking care of sick children for a few hours is not the same as raising a child 24/7. Tommy needs more than someone who can check his temperature and give him medicine. Their words felt like physical blows, each one reinforcing the narrative they constructed about my inadequacy. I was the daughter who couldn't handle real responsibility, who lived in a bubble of professional competence but lacked the fundamental skills for actual life. What if we compromise? Mom suggested. Tommy could live with Emma and David, but visit you regularly. You could be the fun aunt without all the pressure. He's not a pet to be shared, I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended. He's a child who just lost his parents. He needs consistency, not a scheduled visitation. He needs experienced parents, Dad said. People who know what they're doing. I looked through the kitchen doorway at Tommy, who was now holding Peanut the elephant and staring at the floor. He looked so small, so vulnerable, and I realized that our conversation was confirming his worst fears, that he was a burden, that the adults in his life were already looking for ways to pass him off to someone else. I think you should go, I said quietly. Sarah, be reasonable. I think you should go, I repeated, louder this time. Tommy has been here for exactly 2 days, and you're already trying to convince me I'm not good enough to take care of him. He can hear you. He's 7 years old, he just lost his parents, and you're discussing him like he's a problem to be solved. Mom's face flushed. We're trying to help. We're trying to think about what's best for Tommy. What's best for Tommy is having adults who believe in stability and commitment, not adults who question every decision before it's even been made. They left, but not before Dad made one final attempt. Sarah, if you change your mind, if this becomes too much, we're here. Don't let pride keep you from asking for help. After they left, I sat down next to Tommy on the floor. He was building a tall tower with his Legos, his movements careful and deliberate. Are you going to give me away? He asked without looking up. The question hit me like a physical blow. No, Tommy, I'm not going to give you away. I promised your dad I would take care of you, and I keep my promises, even if it's hard. Even if it's hard. He nodded and added another block to his tower. Good. I don't want to live with Aunt Emma. She's loud, and she makes me eat vegetables I don't like. I laughed despite everything. What vegetables don't? You like Brussels sprouts and lima beans, and that green stuff that looks like little trees. Broccoli? Yeah, that. Well, I don't like lima beans either, so we're in agreement on that one. He smiled, a small, tentative expression that felt like sunshine breaking through clouds. It was the first real smile I'd seen from him since Denver. That evening, after Tommy had gone to bed, I sat in my living room looking at the group texts that had continued throughout the day. Emma had sent photos of her house, highlighting the playroom and the big backyard. Mom had shared an article about the importance of two-parent households. Dad had forwarded information about schools in their district. They weren't wrong about the challenges ahead. My apartment was small, my experience was limited, and I would be doing this alone. But as I listened to Tommy's steady breathing from the bedroom, I realized that none of that mattered as much as the simple fact that I was willing to try, willing to learn, willing to put his needs above my own comfort. Jake had trusted me with his son's future, and I wouldn't let family doubt or my own fears keep me from honoring that trust. Tommy deserved someone who saw him as a gift, not a burden, and I was determined to be that person, no matter what anyone else thought about my qualifications. The alarm clock read 2:47 a.m. when Tommy's screaming woke me from the deepest sleep I'd had in a week. I stumbled to the living room where I'd set up his temporary bed and found him sitting upright, eyes wide with terror, calling for his mom. Tommy, it's okay. It's Aunt Sarah. You're safe. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me. His face flushed and streaked with tears. Where's Mom? I want Mom. I sat on the edge of his bed, not reaching for him yet, letting him orient himself to the present moment. This was the 4th nightmare this week, and I was learning that the first few minutes required patience more than comfort. Mom and Dad aren't here anymore, remember? But you're safe with me. The confusion cleared from his eyes, replaced by the devastating sadness that had become his constant companion. I forgot, he whispered. I dreamed they were making pancakes, and Dad was doing that funny voice he does when he pretends to be a robot. That sounds like a nice dream. But then I woke up, and they weren't really here. He looked around my small living room, caking in the makeshift sleeping arrangements and the boxes of his belongings we hadn't unpacked yet. This doesn't feel like home. It will, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. It just takes time. I made him a cup of warm milk with honey, the way I'd seen Amy do it during their visits, and we sat together on the couch until he fell back asleep. By then, it was almost 4 a.m., and I had to be at work in 4 hours. The sleep deprivation was brutal, but it was the least of my concerns. Tommy had been with me for 2 weeks, and we were still figuring out the basics of living together. Simple things that other parents took for granted, like what he liked for breakfast, or how he preferred his bath water, or which pajamas made him feel secure, were mysteries I was solving one day at a time. My supervisor, Janet, had been understanding about my need for schedule flexibility, but I could see the strain in her eyes when I had to leave early for another school meeting or Tommy-related emergency. We'll make it work, she kept saying. But I knew that pediatric nursing required full attention, and mine was divided between the children at the hospital and the child at home. Tommy's adjustment to his new school had been rocky. Lincoln Elementary was a good school, but it was different from his school in Denver, and he was struggling with the transition. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, was kind but concerned. Tommy is very withdrawn, she told me during our first meeting. He completes his work, but he doesn't participate in class discussions or interact much with the other children. Have you considered counseling? I had considered it. We had our first appointment with Dr. Williams scheduled for next week. But I was also learning that Tommy's grief came in waves, and sometimes he needed space to process his feelings without adults constantly asking him to talk about them. At home, he was gradually opening up. He'd started helping me cook dinner, standing on a chair at the counter while I taught him to measure ingredients and stir sauces. He was fascinated by the process of creating something from nothing, and I suspected it gave him a sense of control in a world that had become unpredictable. Can we make Dad spaghetti? He asked one evening, flipping through one of Amy's cookbooks that I brought from their house. He put weird stuff in it, but it was really good. What kind of weird stuff? Mushrooms and green peppers, and he always sang while he cooked. Tommy's voice got quieter. He sang really loud and off-key, and Mom would laugh and tell him to stop scaring the neighbors. I found Jake's handwritten recipe tucked between the pages, his familiar scrawl, detailing ingredients and cooking times. Let's try it, I said, but I can't promise to sing as badly as your dad did. That made him smile, and we spent the evening recreating Jake's signature dish. Tommy narrated his father's cooking process with the kind of detail that only children possess, how Jake always tasted the sauce with a tiny spoon, how he danced while he waited for the water to boil, how he insisted that the secret ingredient was love and a little bit of chaos. These moments of connection were precious, but they were balanced by harder times when Tommy's grief would surface unexpectedly, a song on the radio that reminded him of car rides with his parents. A commercial for a family vacation that made him ask why we couldn't just go to Disney World and bring Mom and Dad back. The casual way other children talked about their families, highlighting the enormous absence in his own life. Why did they have to die? He asked one night during our bedtime routine. It was a question he'd asked before, and I'd learned that children needed to hear the answer multiple times, in different ways as they process the unthinkable. Sometimes bad things happen that nobody can control, I said, sitting on the edge of his bed. The person who was driving the other car made a terrible choice, and your mom and dad got hurt because of it. But why them? Why not somebody else's? Parents? It was the question every grieving child asked, and the one that had no satisfactory answer. I don't know, sweetheart. I wish I could tell you why, but I don't understand it either. Are you going to die too? Not for a very long time. I'm going to be here to take care of you until you're all grown up. Promise? Promise. He seemed satisfied with that, but I lay awake afterward thinking about the weight of promises made to children. He'd learned that adults could disappear, without warning that the people who were supposed to protect you could vanish in an instant. Rebuilding his trust in the stability of the world would take time, patience, and consistency. The practical challenges were as overwhelming as the emotional ones. I had to learn about school registration, pediatric dentists, and children's clothing sizes. My grocery shopping had expanded to include items I'd never purchased: juice boxes, goldfish crackers, and the specific brand of peanut butter that Tommy would actually eat. My evening routine now included homework supervision, bath time negotiations, and the complex choreography of getting a child ready for bed. "You look exhausted," my coworker Lisa commented one afternoon as we restocked supplies in the pediatric ward. "Are you getting any sleep?" "Some," I lied. The truth was that between Tommy's nightmares, my own anxiety about doing everything right, and the physical demands of single parenting, I was running on fumes. "It gets easier," she said. "I remember when my kids were little, I thought I'd never feel human again, but you adapt." I appreciated her encouragement, but Lisa had been married when our children were small. She'd had a partner to share the nighttime wake-ups, the decision-making, the constant vigilance that parenting required. I was doing this alone, learning as I went, with no manual and no backup plan. 3 weeks in, Tommy created something that changed everything. He'd been working quietly at the kitchen table after school, using crayons and construction paper with the focused concentration he brought to all his projects. When he finished, he brought it to me with shy pride. It was a drawing of our apartment, but transformed. He'd added a garden outside the window, a swing set in the living room, and stick figures of the two of us holding hands in front of the building. At the top, in his careful 7-year-old handwriting, he'd written, "My new home with Aunt Sarah. Do you like it?" He asked. I looked at the drawing, at the way he'd made both of us smiling, at the care he'd taken to include Peanut the elephant, sitting on the couch, at the sun shining through the windows. It wasn't just a picture. It was hope made visible, proof that he was beginning to see our life together as something more than a temporary arrangement. "I love it," I said, and I meant it completely. "Can we hang it on the refrigerator?" He nodded eagerly, and we found magnets to display his artwork in the place of honor. Looking at it there, I realized that Tommy wasn't the only one learning to see this as home. Somewhere in the chaos of the past few weeks, my quiet apartment had become something warmer, fuller, more alive. That night, for the first time since Denver, Tommy slept through the night without nightmares. I woke up at 6 a.m. feeling almost human, and found him in the kitchen attempting to make breakfast cereal and toast, arranged carefully on 2 plates. "I wanted to surprise you," he said, beaming with pride. "This is the best surprise ever," I told him, and as we sat at the table eating his creation, I realized that we were doing more than just surviving our new life together. We were actually beginning to build something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy, one small moment at a time. The legal papers arrived on a Thursday morning while Tommy was eating breakfast. I signed for the certified mail, noting the return address, Henderson and Associates, the law firm my parents had apparently hired. My hand shook as I opened the envelope, though I'd been expecting this moment since our confrontation 3 weeks earlier. "Petition for emergency custody modification," read the header in bold, formal typeface. Below it, my parents' names listed as petitioners, seeking immediate custody of Thomas Mitchell, age 7, currently residing with Sarah Mitchell, who they claimed was an unfit guardian lacking the experience, resources, and stability necessary for proper child rearing. Tommy looked up from his cereal. "What's that?" "Just some grown-up paperwork," I said, folding the papers and setting them aside. "Nothing for you to worry about." But inside, I was panicking. The petition outlined their case against me with clinical precision. My single status, my small apartment, my demanding work schedule, my lack of parenting experience. They even included a statement from Emma about her willingness to provide Tommy with a stable 2-parent home with existing children and proven parenting success. I waited until Tommy left for school before calling the Legal Aid Society. The lawyer who answered, Maria Santos, listened patiently as I explained the situation. Do you have a copy of your brother's will? She asked. It's still being processed through probate in Colorado, but the social worker there gave me a copy. It clearly states that I'm to be Tommy's guardian. That's good. And how long has the child been in your care? A month now. How's he adjusting? I thought about Tommy's drawing on the refrigerator, about our nightly cooking sessions, about the way he'd started calling my apartment home. He's doing well. Better than I expected, actually. The court will want to see evidence of stability and proper care. Can you document his school attendance, medical checkups, any counseling he's receiving? I realized I'd been keeping meticulous records without meaning to every school form. Every doctor's visit, every therapy appointment carefully filed in a folder labeled Tommy. My nursing background had taught me the importance of documentation, and it was about to serve us well. Yes, I have everything. Good, I'll represent you. But I need you to understand that family court judges often favor traditional two-parent households, especially when the biological grandparents are involved. We'll need to build a strong case that you're not just adequate, you're the best option for Tommy's well-being. After hanging up, I called work to request time off for legal meetings. Janet's reaction was exactly what I'd feared. Sarah, I understand this is a difficult situation, but you've already used most of your vacation time, and the frequent schedule changes are affecting the unit. How much more time will this require? I don't know yet, but Tommy has to be my priority right now. Of course he does. But you also have responsibilities here. Maybe your family is right to be concerned about your ability to balance everything. Her words stung because they echoed my own fears. Was I being selfish, trying to prove a point at Tommy's expense? Was I really the best guardian for him, or was I just fighting my family's assumptions about my capabilities? That evening, Tommy and I were working on his homework when my phone rang. Emma's name appeared on the screen, and I almost didn't answer. Sarah, we need to talk. If you're calling to convince me to give up custody, you're wasting your time. I'm calling because I care about Tommy and about you. This legal battle is going to be expensive and traumatic for everyone involved. Why put him through that when there's an easier solution? The easier solution is for the family to support the decision Jake made instead of trying to overturn it. Jake was dying, Sarah. He wasn't thinking clearly about what Tommy would actually need. Jake knew exactly what Tommy needed. He'd been watching all of us with him for 7 years. He saw who Tommy felt comfortable with, who understood his personality, who could help him feel secure. Emma sighed. Look, I know you love Tommy, but love isn't enough. He needs stability, financial security, a real home with a yard and other children. He needs parents who know what they're doing. He needs someone who sees him as more than a project to be managed, I said. Someone who doesn't think he needs to be fixed or improved or molded into something he's not. What's that supposed to mean? I thought about Emma's parenting style during family gatherings, the constant corrections, the emphasis on performance, the way she treated her children like extensions of her own success. It means Tommy doesn't need to be anyone other than who he is. You're being naive, Sarah. Parenting isn't about being the fun aunt who lets him eat ice cream for dinner. It's about making hard decisions and setting boundaries and preparing him for the real world. I know what parenting is, I said quietly. I've been doing it for a month now. A month isn't long enough to understand anything. Call me when you realize you're in over your head. She hung up, and I sat staring at my phone, wondering if she was right. Was I being naive? Was I putting my own need to prove myself above Tommy's actual well-being? Aunt Sarah? Tommy had finished his homework and was looking at me with concern. Are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about some grown-up stuff. Are you going to send me away? The question hit me like a physical blow. No, Tommy, I'm not going to send you away. Promise? I promise. But as I tucked him into bed that night, I wondered if I was making promises I might not be able to keep. The legal system didn't care about bedtime stories and homemade spaghetti sauce. It cared about stability and resources and conventional family structures. The next morning, I received another envelope, this one containing the court date for Tommy's custody hearing. 6 weeks away, which meant 6 weeks to build a case that I was the right person to raise Jake's son. 6 weeks to prove that love and dedication could outweigh traditional advantages. I looked at Tommy's drawing on the refrigerator, at the stick figures of us holding hands in front of our building. He'd drawn us both smiling, both confident, both right where we belonged. Now I had to convince a judge that his 7-year-old instincts about family were more reliable than his grandparents', concerns about my qualifications, the custody petition. Sat on my kitchen counter like a ticking bomb, reminding me that everything I'd built with Tommy could be taken away with a single court decision. But as I watched him get ready for school, chattering about a science project and asking if we could make pancakes for dinner, I knew I would fight with everything I had to protect this life we were building together. Jake had trusted me with his son's future, and I wouldn't let legal challenges or family doubt keep me from honoring that trust. Tommy deserved someone who would fight for him, and I was ready for battle. The social worker arrived exactly on time, 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning when Tommy and I were making pancakes. I'd spent the previous evening cleaning the apartment until it sparkled, arranging Tommy's artwork on the walls, and rehearsing answers to questions I imagined she might ask. "Miss Mitchell, I'm Karen Walsh from Franklin County Children's Services." She was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 30s, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that put me slightly at ease. "Please come in. Tommy, can you say hello to Miss Walsh?" Tommy looked up from the pancake batter he was stirring, flour smudged across his cheek. "Hi, we're making pancakes. Do you want some?" Miss Walsh smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her. "That's very kind of you to offer. Maybe I could have just a small one." As I finished cooking, Miss Walsh began her assessment. She walked through the apartment, noting the child-safe locks I'd installed, the books and toys scattered around the living room, the small desk I'd set up in the corner for Tommy's homework. She made notes on her clipboard, but her expression remained neutral. "How long have you been in this apartment?" she asked. 3 years. "I know it's small, but Tommy has his own space, and we're looking at larger places for next year." "And your work schedule?" "I'm a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital. I work 4 10-hour shifts per week, which gives me 3 full days with Tommy. When I'm working, he stays with our neighbor, Mrs. Chun. She's a retired teacher who loves having him around." Miss Walsh interviewed Mrs. Chun next, who spoke glowingly about Tommy's adjustment and my dedication as a guardian. "That child adores Sarah," she said, "and she's a natural with him. Patient, loving, always puts his needs first." The investigation continued throughout the week. Ms. Walsh spoke with Tommy's teacher, his counselor, his pediatrician, and several of my colleagues at the hospital. Each conversation felt like a test I might fail, another opportunity for someone to decide I wasn't qualified to raise a child. Dr. Williams, Tommy's therapist, provided what I hoped was a positive assessment. "Tommy has shown remarkable resilience," she told Ms. Walsh during their meeting. "His attachment to Sarah is healthy and strong. He feels safe with her, which is the foundation for healing from trauma." At the hospital, my supervisor, Janet, gave a more measured response. "Sarah is an excellent nurse," she said when Ms. Walsh called. "Very dedicated, great with children. The custody situation has required some schedule adjustments, but she's managing her responsibilities well." I worried that Janet's lukewarm endorsement might hurt our case, but my colleagues were more enthusiastic. "Sarah has a gift with kids," Lisa told the social worker. "I've watched her calm down the most frightened children, help them feel safe during scary procedures. She has exactly the temperament Tommy needs." The most nerve-wracking part was Ms. Walsh's interview with Tommy himself. She met with him alone at his school, which meant I had no idea what questions she asked or how he responded. When I picked him up that afternoon, he seemed unusually quiet. "How was your talk with Ms. Walsh?" I asked as we drove home. "Fine." She asked a lot of questions. "What kind of questions?" "About you. About whether I like living with you, about Mom and Dad." He was quiet for a moment. "I told her I want to stay with you forever. What else did you tell her? That you make the best grilled cheese sandwiches and that you don't get mad when I have nightmares. And that you read to me every night, even when you're tired. My throat tightened. Those are all true things. She asked if I missed Mom and Dad, and I said yes, but that doesn't mean I want to live with Grandma and Grandpa. They're nice, but they don't understand me like you do. 2 weeks later, Ms. Walsh returned with her preliminary report. Tommy was at school, and I sat across from her at my kitchen table, trying to read her expression as she opened her folder. I want to be clear that my role is to assess what's in Tommy's best interest, she began. I've spoken with everyone involved in his care, and I've observed his interactions with you over several visits. I held my breath. My assessment is that Tommy is thriving in your care. His school performance has improved. His emotional regulation has stabilized, and he's formed a secure attachment to you. His teacher reports that he's more engaged in class and has started making friends. Relief flooded through me. So you'll recommend that he stay with me? My report will reflect that Tommy appears to be in a stable, loving environment where his needs are being met. However, the final decision rests with the court. Your parents have also requested their own evaluation. My heart sank. What does that mean? It means they've hired their own child psychologist to assess the situation. Dr. Patricia Hoffman will be conducting interviews with Tommy and observing his interactions with your parents and sister. Is that normal? In contested custody cases, yes. Each side has the right to present their own evidence. I thought about Dr. Hoffman having access to Tommy, asking him questions designed to highlight the advantages of living with his grandparents. Or Emma, when will that happen? Next week. And Sarah, I want you to know that Tommy spoke very clearly about his preferences. Children his age don't always articulate their feelings well, but he was quite definitive about wanting to remain with you. After Ms. Walsh left, I called Maria Santos to update her on the situation. The good news is that the county social worker seems to be on your side, Maria said. The challenging news is that your parents' evaluation could complicate things. Dr. Hoffman has a reputation for favoring traditional family structures. What can I do to prepare? Continue doing exactly what you've been doing. Document everything: Tommy's progress in school, his therapy sessions, his medical checkups. And Sarah? Don't let them intimidate you. You've been Tommy's guardian for 2 months now, and by all accounts, he's thriving. That matters more than theoretical advantages. That evening, Tommy and I worked on a puzzle together, a 500-piece image of a lighthouse that was proving more challenging than either of us had anticipated. This piece looks like it should fit, but it doesn't, Tommy said, holding up a corner section. Sometimes things that look right aren't actually right, I said. You have to keep trying until you find the piece that really belongs. He considered this, then looked up at me. Like how Grandma thinks I should live with her, but I really belong with you. The simple clarity of his observation took my breath away. Yeah, sweetheart. Exactly like that. The puzzle pieces know where they belong, he said, successfully placing the piece he'd been struggling with. And I know where I belong too. As we continued working on the puzzle, I marveled at his resilience, his ability to understand complex emotional truths with the straightforward wisdom of childhood. Miss Walsh's report would carry weight in court, but Tommy's own voice, his clear sense of where he felt safe and loved, would be the most powerful evidence of all. The investigation had been stressful, but it had also revealed something important. We weren't just surviving our new life together. We were building something strong, something that could withstand outside scrutiny and emerge even more solid than before. I found Emma's diary by accident. Tommy and I were at my parents' house for what they'd insisted was a neutral family dinner, their attempt to show Dr. Hoffman that we could all get along civilly. Emma had stepped outside to take a call, leaving, her purse open on the kitchen counter, and when Tommy knocked over his juice glass, I grabbed napkins from our bag to clean up the spill. The small leather journal fell out onto the counter, open to a page dated just 3 days earlier. I shouldn't have read it. I knew that even as my eyes scanned the first line, but what I saw made me forget about privacy and propriety. I can't let Sarah win this custody battle. It's not about what's best for Tommy, it's about the fact that she's finally getting attention for something, and I can't stand it. My hands shook as I continued reading. Everyone keeps talking about how wonderful Sarah is, how she stepped up, how she's such a natural mother. It makes me sick. I'm the one who did everything right got, married, had kids, built the perfect family, but now she gets to swoop in and play hero just because Jake died? The words hit me like physical blows. This wasn't about Tommy's well-being or concerns about my fitness as a guardian. This was about Emma's jealousy, her inability to accept that. For once, I was the one receiving praise and support from others. David thinks I'm being petty, but he doesn't understand. Sarah has always been the victim, the one everyone feels sorry for. Poor Sarah with her failed engagement, poor Sarah who can't have children, poor Sarah who works so hard and gets nothing in return. Well, now she gets to be Saint Sarah, the devoted aunt who rescued an orphan child. It's nauseating. I closed the journal quickly as Emma came back inside, but the damage was done. Her true motivations were now crystal clear, written in her own handwriting as evidence of a jealousy so deep it overrode any concern for her nephew's emotional well-being. Everything okay? Emma asked, noticing my pale face. Fine. Just tired. But I wasn't fine. I was furious, hurt, and simultaneously vindicated. Every instinct I'd had about Emma's motives had been correct. She wasn't fighting for Tommy because she thought he'd be better off with her. She was fighting against me because she couldn't tolerate the idea of me succeeding where she perceived herself as the natural choice. The dinner proceeded with forced normalcy, but I found myself watching Emma with new eyes. Her interactions with Tommy were performative, designed more to impress our parents than to connect with him. She asked him about school in the bright, artificial tone people use when they're trying too hard. She complimented his table manners, loudly enough for everyone to hear. She even offered to help him with his homework, though she'd never shown interest in his education before. Tommy, wouldn't you like to have a big brother and sister? She asked, gesturing toward Madison and Connor, who were absorbed in their tablets at the other end of the table. We could have so much fun together. Tommy looked uncomfortable with the attention, I guess. And we have that big backyard with a swing set. You could have friends over for birthday parties. I like Aunt Sarah's apartment, Tommy said quietly. It's cozy. Emma's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. Well, of course it's nice for visiting. But wouldn't you prefer a real house? I have a real house, Tommy sighed with the matter-of-fact tone children use when adults ask obvious questions. I live with Aunt Sarah. After dinner, I helped with the dishes while Tommy played with his cousins in the living room. Emma joined me in the kitchen, and I struggled to act normal while our diary entries echoed in my mind. You know, Sarah, I've been thinking about what Dr. Hoffman might ask Tommy when she interviews him next week. Oh, children his age are easily influenced. They might say things they don't really mean, especially if they think it's what certain adults want to hear. I turned to face her fully. Are you suggesting that I'm coaching Tommy on what to say? I'm just saying that children are always the best judges of what's actually good for them. They might choose ice cream for dinner every night if you let them. Tommy isn't choosing ice cream for dinner. He's choosing to stay with the person who's been caring for him since his parents died. The person his father specifically selected. As his guardian, Emma's max slipped slightly. Jake was dying, Sarah. He wasn't thinking clearly about the practicalities of raising a child. Jake was thinking perfectly clearly about who would love Tommy unconditionally and put his needs first. Maybe that's what you can't understand. What's that supposed to mean? I thought about her diary, about the ugly truth of her motivations. It means that some people see children as accessories to their perfect life, and some people see them as human beings who deserve unconditional love. Emma's face flushed. You think you're so much better than the rest of us, don't you? The noble single woman who dedicates her life to other people's children because she can't have her own. Her words were meant to wound, and they succeeded. But they also revealed the depth of her resentment, the years of accumulated jealousy that had been festering beneath her perfect exterior. I think I'm the person Jake chose to raise his son, I said quietly. And I think Tommy's happy healthy and thriving in my care. That's all that matters. We'll see what Dr. Hoffman thinks about that. The threat was clear, but it no longer intimidated me the way it might have before reading her diary. Now I understood that Emma's opposition wasn't based on legitimate concerns. About Tommy's welfare, it was based on her inability to accept that I might succeed at something important. On the drive home, Tommy was unusually quiet. "You okay, buddy?" I asked. Aunt Emma was being weird tonight. Weird how? She kept asking me questions about stuff I don't care about. Like whether I want a bigger bedroom and whether I'm sad that you work sometimes. But I told her I like my room and I'm not sad when you work because Mrs. Chum makes really good cookies. Did she ask you anything else? She wanted to know if I missed having a mom and dad around all the time. I told her I miss mom and dad every day, but that doesn't mean I want different people taking care of me. The wisdom of children never ceased to amaze me. At 7 years old, Tommy could distinguish between missing his parents and wanting a different living situation, a nuance that seemed to escape the adults fighting over his future. She said maybe Dr. Hoffman would ask me different questions, and I should think really hard about my answers. My blood ran cold. What kind of different questions? I don't know. But Aunt Emma said I should remember that Grandma and Grandpa are getting old and you have to work a lot, and wouldn't I rather live in a house with other kids? And what did you tell her? I told her I already thought really hard about where I want to live, and I want to live with you. She didn't like that answer very much. That night after Tommy was asleep, I sat in my living room looking at his latest artwork on the refrigerator, a drawing of the two of us building a snowman. Both of us bundled up in winter coats and smiling. He'd been working on it during art therapy, and Dr. Williams had noted how it showed his sense of security and belonging in our household. Emma's diary had revealed the ugly truth behind the custody battle, but it had also strengthened my resolve. Tommy deserved better than to be used as a pawn in his aunt's jealousy. He deserved to be loved for who he was, not for what he represented or what advantages he might provide to the adults in his life. I thought about calling Maria Santos to tell her about the diary, but decided against it. Emma's motivations were clear to me now, and that knowledge was more valuable than any legal advantage. I understood exactly what I was fighting against, not concern for Tommy's well-being, but a desperate attempt to maintain a family hierarchy that had never served anyone's best interests. The custody hearing was still weeks away, but I felt more prepared than ever to defend the life Tommy and I had built together, because I now knew with absolute certainty that our bond was real. While Emma's interest in him was just another performance in her lifelong quest to be seen as perfect. The letter arrived on a Wednesday morning, delivered not by regular mail, but by a private courier who required my signature. The return address was my parents' lawyer, but the envelope felt too thick for a simple legal document. Inside, along with the formal legal papers, was a handwritten letter from my father. "Sarah," it began, "your mother and I have tried to reason with you about this situation, but you've made it clear that you intend to proceed regardless of our concerns. We want you to understand the full consequences of your decision." I sat down at my kitchen table, Tommy's breakfast dishes still in the sink, and continued reading. "If you persist in this misguided attempt to retain custody of Tommy, you will be cut off from this family permanently. Your inheritance, your place in family gatherings, your relationship with your sister and your parents, all of it will end. We cannot and will not support a decision that we believe is harmful to Tommy's future." The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears. After 34 years of being their daughter, it had come down to this: choose between the child who needed me and the family that had never fully accepted me. They have always hoped you would find your place in this family, your purpose in life, but this isn't it. You're using a traumatized child to fulfill some misguided maternal fantasy, and we won't be party to it. Emma and David are prepared to provide Tommy with everything he needs: stability, financial security, siblings, and parents who actually know what they're doing. I set the letter down and picked up the legal document. It was a formal disinheritance notice, complete with language about irreconcilable differences regarding the welfare of a minor child, and the permanent severing of familial financial obligations. They'd had their lawyer draft it to make it as official and intimidating as possible. Tommy came into the kitchen carrying his backpack, ready for school. "What's that?" he asked, noticing the papers scattered across the table. "Just some mail." "From Grandma and Grandpa," I said, quickly gathering the documents. "Are they coming to visit?" "Not right now, sweetheart." "Are you ready for school?" As I drove Tommy to school, I thought about the letter's implicit threat. My parents had always used financial security as a form of control, the promise of inheritance, the safety net of family money, the assumption that their children would need their support throughout their lives. For Emma, that control had been welcome. She never had to worry about money because she'd always done exactly what they wanted. But I'd built my own life, my own career, my own sense of security. Their money had never been mine to count on, and losing access to it wouldn't change my ability to provide for Tommy. Still, the emotional impact was devastating. They were asking me to choose between Tommy and them, as if love were a finite resource that couldn't be shared across generational lines. They were willing to disown their own daughter rather than accept her decision to honor her brother's wishes. After dropping Tommy off, I called Maria Santos. "They can't actually disinherit you for taking custody of your nephew," she said after I'd read her the letter. "But they can change their will to exclude you, which seems to be what they're threatening. Does this help our case in any way?" "It might, actually. It shows that their opposition is more about control than concern for Tommy's welfare. A judge might question their motives if they're willing to split up the family over this issue." That evening, Emma called. Her tone was different, less confrontational, more pleading. "Sarah, please tell me you're not going to throw away your entire family for this." "I'm not throwing away anything. You and Mom and Dad are the ones making ultimatums, but can't you see how this looks? You're choosing a child over your own parents and sister, over the people who've loved you your whole life. The people who've loved me my whole life would support me in caring for an orphan child, especially when that's what his father wanted." "Jake was my brother too," Emma said, her voice breaking. "I loved him too. But he didn't understand what raising a child actually involves. He saw you being good with Tommy during visits and vacations, but that's not the same as day-to-day parenting." "Emma, I've been doing day-to-day parenting for 3 months now. Tommy is thriving. His teacher says he's the most improved student in his class. His therapist says he's remarkably resilient. He's happy, healthy, and secure. But for how long? What happens when he becomes a teenager? What happens when you want to date someone? What happens when you realize that you've given up your entire youth to raise someone else's child?" The questions stung because they echoed fears I'd had in my darkest moments. But they also revealed Emma's fundamental misunderstanding of what parenthood meant, the assumption that children were burdens to be endured rather than gifts to be cherished. "Tommy isn't someone else's child," I said quietly. "He's my nephew. He's family. And taking care of family isn't giving up your life. It's finding your purpose. You're being naive. And you're being selfish." The line went quiet for a long moment. When Emma spoke again, her voice was cold. "Fine. Don't say we didn't warn you. But when this all falls apart, when you realize you can't handle it, when Tommy starts acting out, when you're exhausted and alone and overwhelmed, don't expect us to clean up the mess." She hung up, and I sat in my living room listening to the silence. Tommy was in his room doing homework, humming softly to himself as he worked. The sound of a child who felt safe, who felt loved, who felt at home. I picked up the disinheritance letter and read it again, looking for any hint of love or concern beneath the legal language and ultimatums. But there was nothing, just the cold calculation of people who saw relationships as transactions, love as conditional, and family loyalty as something that could be purchased or withdrawn based on compliance. When Tommy came out for his bedtime snack, I was still sitting on the couch with the letter in my hands. "Are you sad?" he asked, climbing up next to me. "A little bit." "Why?" I thought about how to explain family dysfunction to a 7-year-old who'd already lost too much. "Sometimes grown-ups disagree about important things, and it makes everyone sad." "Are you disagreeing with Grandma and Grandpa about me?" "Yes, what do they want?" They want you to live with Aunt Emma instead of with me. Tommy considered this. But I don't want to live with Aunt Emma. I want to live with you. I know, sweetheart. And I want you to live with me too. So why are we disagreeing? If we both want the same thing and it's what Dad wanted too, why can't we just do it? The simplicity of his logic was heartbreaking. In his world, love should be enough to overcome obstacles. Adults who cared about children should prioritize their happiness over their own preferences. Families should support each other instead of issuing ultimatums. Sometimes grown-ups make things more complicated than they need to be, I said. That's silly. Yes, it is. That night, I put the disinheritance letter in a folder with all the other legal documents related to Tommy's custody. It was evidence of what I was fighting against, a family that saw love as conditional, that valued appearances over authenticity, that was willing to destroy relationships rather than admit they might be wrong. But as I listened to Tommy sleeping peacefully in his room, I knew I'd already made my choice. Jake had trusted me with his son's future, and Tommy had chosen to trust me with his heart. That was worth more than any inheritance, any family approval, any conventional measure of success. I was choosing Tommy, and in doing so, I was choosing the person I wanted to be, someone who honored commitments, someone who put children's needs first, someone who understood that real family was built on love and loyalty, rather than blood and obligation. The ultimatum had been designed to scare me into compliance, but it had only strengthened my resolve. I would fight for Tommy with or without my family's support, because he deserved someone who would never ask him to choose between love and security, someone who would never make their care conditional on his compliance. He deserved unconditional love, and I was prepared to give it to him no matter what it cost me. Dr. Patricia Hoffman's office was decorated in soothing pastels with child-sized furniture and toys strategically placed around the room. I sat in the waiting area while she conducted her court-ordered evaluation with Tommy, trying not to imagine the questions she might be asking or the way his answers might be interpreted. Through the thin walls, I could hear the murmur of their conversation, but couldn't make out specific words. Tommy had been nervous that morning, asking repeatedly what would happen if he said the wrong thing. There are no wrong answers, I'd assured him. Just tell the truth about how you feel. But what if the truth isn't what she wants to hear? The question had haunted me all morning. What if Tommy's truth that he wanted to stay with me wasn't enough to convince a system that valued conventional families over individual bonds? After 45 minutes, Dr. Hoffman emerged with Tommy, who immediately ran to me and buried his face in my shoulder. How did it go? I asked softly. Okay, I guess. She asked a lot of questions. Dr. Hoffman observed our interaction with clinical interest, making notes on her clipboard. Tommy, why don't you play with the toys while I speak with your aunt? She led me into her office, a more formal space with adult furniture and diplomas covering the walls. Her expression was neutral but not unkind. I want to discuss Tommy's responses to my evaluation, she began. He's a very articulate child for his age, quite clear about his preferences. What did he tell you? He expressed a strong desire to remain in your care. When I asked him about his living situation, he described your apartment as home and spoke positively about his daily routines. With you? Relief flooded through me. That's good, right? It's certainly relevant. However, I also explored his understanding of the alternatives available to him. When I described the benefits of living with his grandparents or his Aunt Emma larger, homes more family members, traditional two-parent structures, he seemed to understand these advantages, but remained firm in his preference. She flipped through her notes. I asked him specifically about feeling lonely or missing having siblings around. His response was interesting. He said, I'm not lonely with Aunt Sarah because she really listens to me, and I like being the only kid because I get all the attention. Did you ask him about his parents? Yes. His grief responses are appropriate for his age and situation. He clearly misses his parents, but doesn't appear to be looking for replacements. Instead, he seems to view you as a continuation of his existing family structure rather than a substitute. What does that mean for your recommendation? Dr. Hoffman set down her clipboard and looked at me directly. Tommy was quite clear about something. Miss Mitchell, he said his father told him specifically that you would take care of him. He remembers that conversation, and it clearly holds significant weight in his mind. My throat tightened. Jake did. Tell him that. The night before the accident, during a phone call, children Tommy's age often struggle to express complex emotions, but he was remarkably articulate about his sense of security with you. He said, and I quote, "Aunt Sarah doesn't try to make me feel better by pretending Mom and Dad didn't die. She just helps me feel better by being nice to me." The wisdom of his words hit me like a physical blow. While other adults had tried to minimize his grief or distract him from it, I'd simply acknowledged his loss and focused on making him feel safe in the present moment. He also said something that concerned me, Dr. Hoffman continued. When I asked about his grandparents and Aunt Emma, he said they keep asking him what he wants instead of listening to what he's already told them. He feels pressured by their questions. Pressured how? He feels like they want him to change his mind, that they don't believe his answers are real or permanent. This is creating anxiety for him. He's worried that adults don't think children can know their own minds about important things. She opened a different folder and pulled out what looked like artwork. I asked Tommy to draw his family. This is what he created. The drawing showed 3 figures, 2 adults labeled Mom and Dad floating in clouds above a house, and 2 figures standing in front of the house holding hands, one labeled me and one labeled Aunt Sarah. Inside the house, he'd drawn a kitchen table with 2 chairs and what looked like a cat. "We don't have a cat," I said, confused. When I asked him about that, he said he hopes he'll get one someday because cats are good for people who are sad. He said you're sometimes sad about Mom and Dad too, and a cat would help both of you feel better. The thoughtfulness of his observation brought tears to my eyes. While I'd been focused on helping him process his grief, he'd been paying attention to mine as well. Dr. Hoffman, what concerns do you have about Tommy remaining with me? Honestly, very few. Your living situation is stable, he's thriving academically, and socially, and his attachment to you appears secure and healthy. My primary concern is the family conflict surrounding his placement. What do you mean? Tommy is aware that his placement with you is being contested. He's worried about being taken away, as he puts it. This anxiety is counterproductive to his healing process. So, what do you recommend? Dr. Hoffman was quiet for a long moment. My report will reflect that Tommy has clearly expressed his preferences, that he appears to be thriving in your care, and that disrupting his current placement would likely be detrimental to his emotional well-being. Even though I'm single, even though my apartment is small, even though his grandparents could provide more traditional advantages, Ms. Mitchell, in my 15 years of conducting custody evaluations, I've learned that children need safety, consistency, and unconditional love more than they need large houses or conventional family structures. Tommy feels safe with you. He trusts you. He's healing under your care. She gathered her notes and stood up. I will say this, the adults in Tommy's extended family seem more focused on what they think he needs than on what he's actually telling them he needs. Children are remarkably good at knowing where they feel most secure, especially children who've experienced trauma. When we left Dr. Hoffman's office, Tommy was quiet during the drive home. Finally, he spoke up. Did I do okay? You did great, sweetheart. You just told the truth. She asked me if I would be sad if I had to go live somewhere else. What did you tell her? I told her I would be very sad. I told her that losing Mom and Dad was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and losing you would be the second worst thing. His words broke my heart and filled it simultaneously. At 7 years old, he understood the weight of loss better than most adults, and he was fighting for our life together with the clarity that only children possess. I also told her something else, he said. What? I told her that Dad picked you to take care of me because he knew you would love me the most. And I was right, you do love me the most. As we pulled into our apartment complex, I looked at Tommy in the rearview mirror. His face was serious but not scared, determined but not defiant. He knew what he wanted, and he was old enough to articulate why. Tommy? Yeah? Thank you for telling Dr. Hoffman how you really feel. "I always tell the truth about important things," he said. "Dad taught me that." That night, as I tucked him into bed, Tommy asked one final question about the evaluation. "Aunt Sarah, do you think Dr. Hoffman believed me when I said I want to stay with you?" "I think she believed you completely." "Good, because it's true. Even if nobody else understands it, it's still true." The session notes that arrived a week later confirmed what Dr. Hoffman had told me in person. Her recommendation was clear. Tommy should remain in my care, with regular family visits, but no change in primary custody. She cited his clear preferences, his obvious attachment to me, and the disruption that a placement change would cause to his healing process. Tommy's voice had been heard, and it had spoken loud and clear in favor of the life we built together. Now we just had to hope that the court would listen to what a 7-year-old knew in his heart, that love and security matter more than conventional advantages, and that sometimes the best family is the one you choose to build from the ashes of loss. The Franklin County Family Court was nothing like the courtrooms I'd seen on television. It was smaller, more intimate, with warm wood paneling and fluorescent lighting that cast everything in a sterile glow. I sat at a table with Maria Santos, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking, while across the aisle my parents sat with their attorney, Mr. Henderson, a man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of confident bearing that came from years of winning cases. Judge Patricia Weaver entered the courtroom at exactly 9 a.m., her black robes flowing behind her as she took her seat at the bench. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe in her 40s, with intelligent eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the room. "This is a custody hearing regarding the minor child Thomas Mitchell, age 7, she began, her voice clear and authoritative. "The court will hear testimony regarding the petition filed by Robert and Margaret Mitchell seeking custody modification, as well as the response filed by Sarah Mitchell, the child's current guardian." Tommy wasn't in the courtroom, the judge had decided to interview him privately in her chambers if necessary, sparing him the trauma of watching adults argue over his future. But his presence felt everywhere in the school photos Maria had submitted as evidence, in the therapy reports detailing his progress, in the custody evaluation that Dr. Hoffman had filed supporting my guardianship. Mr. Henderson rose first, his opening statement delivered with the polished confidence of someone who'd argued hundreds of similar cases. "Your Honor, this case is about what's truly best for a traumatized child who has already lost too much. While we commend Miss Sarah Mitchell for her temporary care of Tommy, the reality is that good intentions cannot substitute for experience, stability, and the resources necessary to properly raise a child." He outlined my parents' case methodically, their successful track record of raising 3 children, their financial stability, their large home with a yard, their availability for full-time childcare. He painted a picture of grandparents who could provide Tommy with everything he needed: siblings through Emma's children, educational opportunities, extracurricular activities, and the kind of traditional family structure that courts typically favored. Miss Sarah Mitchell is 34 years old, has never been married, has no children of her own, and works a demanding full-time job, Henderson continued. She lives in a 1-bedroom apartment and has been forced to rely on neighbors for childcare. While her love for Tommy is evident, love alone cannot provide the stability and resources this child deserves. When it was Maria's turn, she stood with quiet confidence. Her opening statement focused not on what I lacked, but on what Tommy had gained. "Your Honor, this case is indeed about what's best for Tommy Mitchell. And what's best for Tommy is remaining with the guardian his father specifically chose, in the home where he's been thriving for the past 4 months." She presented the evidence systematically. Tommy's improved grades, his positive adjustment according to his teacher and therapist, his clear preferences as documented in Dr. Hoffman's evaluation, and most importantly, his father's explicit wishes, as outlined in Jake's will. The petitioners would have this court believe that stability is measured in square footage and bank account balances, Maria said. But true stability for a child comes from consistent, loving care from someone who puts his needs first. That someone is Sarah Mitchell. The testimony began with my parents taking the stand. Mom spoke about their experience raising children, their desire to provide Tommy with siblings and extended family connections, their concerns about my ability to balance work and parenting responsibilities. Sarah has always been a caring person, Mom said, her voice carefully modulated. But caring for a child part-time during visits is very different from the full-time responsibility of raising him. Tommy needs parents who understand child development, who can help him navigate the challenges ahead. Under cross-examination, Maria pressed gently but effectively. Mrs. Mitchell, have you visited Tommy at Sarah's apartment? Yes, several times. How did he seem during those visits? He seemed fine. Just fine? Not happy, not comfortable, not secure? Well, yes, he seemed happy. And have you observed any signs that he's not receiving proper care? Mom hesitated. No, but have his grades improved since living with Sarah? Yes. Has his behavior at school improved? According to his teacher, yes. And when you've asked Tommy directly about his preferences, what has he told you? He says he wants to stay with Sarah, but children don't always know what's best for them. When Dad took the stand, the questioning followed a similar pattern. Yes, Tommy seemed well cared for. Yes, he appeared happy and healthy. Yes, he'd consistently expressed his desire to remain with me. But no, they didn't believe a 7-year-old could make such an important decision. Emma's testimony was more pointed. She spoke about her own parenting experience, her ability to provide Tommy with siblings, her concerns about my lack of preparation for the challenges of raising a child through adolescence. Sarah means well, Emma said, but she's never dealt with homework battles, teenage rebellion, or the complex social dynamics that children face. Tommy needs experienced parents who know how to navigate these challenges. Under cross-examination, Maria asked pointed questions about Emma's motivations. Ms. Anderson, prior to this custody dispute, how often did you spend one-on-one time with Tommy? During family gatherings, of course. But one-on-one time just you and Tommy? Emma shifted, uncomfortably. Well, there were always other children around during visits. Have you ever babysat Tommy overnight? Not specifically, no. Have you discussed with Tommy what he would like his living situation to be? Children his age aren't equipped to make such decisions. That wasn't my question. Have you asked him what he wants? Yes, and he says he wants to stay with Sarah, but he's confused and traumatized. When it was my turn to testify, I felt the weight of everyone's expectations. Maria led me through my qualifications, my nursing background, my experience with children, my understanding of trauma and grief. I spoke about Tommy's daily routine, his progress in school and therapy, his moments of joy and healing. Ms. Mitchell, Maria asked, why do you believe you're the right person to raise Tommy? I looked across the courtroom at my parents, at Emma, at the court reporter documenting every word. Because his father trusted me with the most important thing in his life, because Tommy feels safe with me. Because I see him as a whole person, not a problem to be solved or project to be managed. What would you say to concerns about your single status, your work schedule, your living situation? I would say that love doesn't require a husband or a large house. It requires commitment, consistency, and the willingness to put a child's needs first. I've been doing that for 4 months, and I'll continue doing it for as long as Tommy needs. Henderson's cross-examination was aggressive, designed to highlight every potential weakness in my case. Ms. Mitchell, you've never been married, correct? Correct. You've never successfully maintained a long-term relationship? I was engaged for 2 years. But that relationship ended, didn't it? Yes. You've never had children of your own. No. In fact, you've struggled with infertility, haven't you? Maria objected, but the damage was done. Henderson was painting a picture of someone who'd failed at traditional milestones and was using Tommy to fulfill unmet needs. You work 40 hours a week at a demanding job, correct? Yes. And you've had to make arrangements for Tommy's care during those hours? Yes, with a wonderful neighbor who... So Tommy is in the care of strangers while you're at work? Mrs. Chun isn't a stranger. She's a retired teacher who... But she's not family, is she? The questions continued, each one designed to chip away at my credibility. But when Henderson asked his final question, I was ready. Ms. Mitchell, why should this court prioritize your desire to keep Tommy over his grandparents' ability to provide him with a traditional family structure? I took a deep breath and looked directly at Judge Weaver. Because this isn't about my desires or their abilities. This is about Tommy's needs. And Tommy needs someone who will love him exactly as he is, who will honor his grief while helping him build a future, who will never make him feel like a burden or a consolation prize. Jake trusted me with his son because he knew I would fight for Tommy's happiness, not my own satisfaction. The courtroom was quiet as I returned to my seat. Judge Weaver reviewed her notes for several minutes before speaking. The court will take a 30-minute recess to review the evidence and testimony. We will reconvene for closing arguments, after which I will render my decision. As we filed out of the courtroom, I caught sight of my parents for the first time since the hearing began. Dad looked confident while Mom seemed uncertain. Emma was checking her phone, already mentally moving on to her next obligation, but the only opinion that mattered now belonged to Judge Weaver, who would decide whether Tommy's voice and his father's wishes carried more weight than conventional expectations about family structure and financial advantage. In 30 minutes, I would know whether the life Tommy and I had built together would be allowed to continue, or whether love and dedication would prove insufficient in a system that valued traditional advantages over individual bonds. During the 30-minute recess, I sat in the courthouse hallway trying to process everything that had happened. The testimony had been brutal, with each side presenting compelling arguments for why their vision of Tommy's future was correct. But as I replayed the morning's events, I realized something was missing, the one piece of evidence that should have been central to the entire proceeding. Maria, I said, turning to my lawyer, shouldn't Jake's will be more definitive? I mean, he specifically named me as Tommy's guardian. Doesn't that carry legal weight? It absolutely does, she replied. But your parents' lawyer is arguing that the will was written before Jake fully understood the implications of choosing a single guardian over married grandparents. They're essentially asking the court to override his decision based on changed circumstances. But Jake knew exactly what he was doing. He and Amy had talked about this. I stopped mid-sentence as I saw a familiar figure walking down the courthouse hallway. It was Robert Chun, Mrs. Chun's son, who worked as a paralegal at a downtown law firm. He was carrying a manila envelope and scanning door numbers as if looking for our courtroom. Ms. Mitchell? He called when he spotted me. I have something for you. Mom asked me to deliver this personally. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a thick document, Jake's complete will, but not the copy I'd received from the Colorado probate court. This one had additional pages, including what appeared to be a letter attached to the original document. Where did this come from? I asked. Mom found it in Tommy's backpack when she was helping him with homework last week. Apparently, he'd been carrying it around since Denver. When she showed it to me, I realized it might be important for your case. My heart pounded as I read the cover letter, written in Jake's handwriting and dated just 2 weeks before the accident. 2. Whom it may concern. I am writing this letter to clarify my decision regarding guardianship of my son, Thomas Mitchell, in the event that both my wife Amy and I are unable to care for him. While I love and respect my parents and sister, I am explicitly naming my sister Sarah as Tommy's guardian for the following reasons. Maria leaned over to read along with me, her eyes widening as she absorbed the content. This changes everything, she whispered. Jake anticipated the exact arguments your family would make, and he addressed them directly. The letter continued in Jake's measured, thoughtful tone, the same voice I remembered from our last phone conversation. My parents believe that raising children requires marriage, financial resources, and traditional family structures. They raised my sisters and me with love, but also with rigid expectations about success and conformity. Sarah has always been the family member who sees people as they are rather than as she thinks they should be. I felt tears building as I read his words. Even facing his own mortality, Jake had taken the time to explain his reasoning to protect Tommy from the exact custody battle we were now fighting. Sarah has spent her career caring for children in crisis. She understands trauma. She knows how to help children heal. and she has the patience and emotional intelligence that Tommy will need. More importantly, she loves him unconditionally. She doesn't see him as a reflection of her own success or failure. She sees him as a whole person deserving of respect and care. The letter addressed specific concerns that had been raised during the hearing. I know my parents will argue that Sarah is single and therefore unable to provide a complete family structure, but Sarah's love is complete. She will not see Tommy as a burden or an obligation. She will not expect him to fill roles or meet expectations beyond simply being himself. Jake had even anticipated Emma's involvement. I know Emma will offer to take Tommy, believing that her experience as a mother qualifies her as the best choice. But Emma's parenting style is focused on achievement and appearance. Tommy needs someone who will help him process grief and find his own path, not someone who will try to mold him into a replacement for the children she's already raising. The most powerful section came at the end. Sarah has never been able to have children of her own, though she desperately wanted them. I know this because Amy told me about Sarah's struggles with infertility, her miscarriages, and the end of her engagement because of these challenges. Sarah could have chosen to resent children or avoid them entirely. Instead, she dedicated her career to caring for other people's children. She chose love over bitterness, service over self-pity. Tommy adores Sarah, and she adores him. When he's with her, he's relaxed, curious, and confident. He doesn't feel pressure to perform or achieve, he simply feels loved. That's what he'll need to heal from losing his parents. The letter concluded with a direct plea to any court that might review his decision. I'm not making this choice impulsively or without consideration of the alternatives. I am choosing Sarah because she is the person who will love Tommy best, understand him most deeply, and help him become the person he's meant to be. Please honor this decision as it represents my deepest conviction about my son's welfare. Maria was already on her phone, calling the court clerk to request an emergency addition to our evidence. Your Honor needs to see this before she renders her decision, she said. Robert Chun smiled. Mom said to tell you that Tommy is very proud of his dad for writing that letter. He told her that his dad always knew the right thing to do. 20 minutes later, we were back in the courtroom. Judge Weaver had agreed to review the additional document before closing arguments, and I watched her face as she read Jake's letter. Her expression remained neutral, but I noticed her glancing up at my parents occasionally, as if seeing them in a new light. When she finished reading, she looked up at both legal teams. Mr. Henderson, were you aware that Mr. Jake Mitchell had written a detailed explanation of his guardianship decision? Henderson looked genuinely surprised. No, Your Honor. This is the first we've seen of such a document. And Miss Santos? Why wasn't this letter included in your original filing? The guardian was not aware of its existence until today, Your Honor. The child had been carrying it in his school backpack since leaving Colorado. Judge Weaver studied the document again. The court notes that this letter directly addresses many of the concerns raised by the petitioners. Mr. Mitchell clearly anticipated that his guardianship decision might be challenged, and he took the time to explain his reasoning in detail. She looked at my parents' table. Mr. Henderson, does your client wish to respond to the substance of this letter? Henderson conferred quickly with my parents, then stood. Your Honor, while we respect my client's deceased son's intentions, we maintain that circumstances have changed since this letter was written. The realities of single parenthood, the demands of Mitchell's career, and the child's need for stability remain valid concerns. I see. Miss Santos, do you wish to address this new evidence in your closing argument? Yes, Your Honor. Maria's closing was brief but powerful. She read key passages from Jake's letter aloud, emphasizing his specific knowledge of each family, members' strengths and limitations. She highlighted his professional assessment of Tommy's needs and his reasoned explanation for choosing me over more conventional options. Your Honor, this letter proves that Jake Mitchell's decision was not impulsive or uninformed. He understood exactly what he was doing when he chose Sarah as Tommy's guardian. He knew his family would challenge this decision, and he took the time to explain why Tommy's best interests were served by this placement. When Maria sat down, the courtroom was silent, except for the sound of the court reporter's typing. Judge Weaver reviewed her notes one final time, then looked up at all of us. The court is ready to render its decision. Jake's letter had changed the entire context of the hearing. No longer was this a case about an impulsive guardianship decision made by a dying man. This was about a father's careful, thoughtful choice to entrust his son to the person he believed would love him best. As I waited for Judge Weaver's ruling, I thought about Jake carrying that letter to the lawyer's office, taking the time to articulate his reasoning even while facing his own mortality. He had known this moment would come, and he'd given me the most powerful ally possible, his own voice, speaking from beyond the grave about what was truly best for his son. Judge Weaver set Jake's letter aside and looked directly at me, then at my parents, her expression serious but not unkind. The court has reviewed all testimony, evidence, and expert recommendations in this matter. However, before I render my decision, I want to address something that has become clear during these proceedings. She picked up Jake's letter again, holding it so everyone could see it. Mr. Jake Mitchell wrote this letter because he anticipated exactly what has happened here today. He knew that his decision to name his sister as guardian would be challenged by family members who believed they knew better than he did what was best for his son. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while Emma stared straight ahead, her jaw tight. What's particularly revealing about this letter is not just Mr. Mitchell's reasoning for choosing Sarah, but his intimate knowledge of family dynamics that have clearly influenced this custody dispute. Judge Weaver opened the letter to a specific page. Mr. Mitchell wrote, and I quote, "I know my parents love Tommy, but their love has always come with conditions and expectations. Sarah's love is unconditional. She will not try to remake Tommy into her image of what a child should be. She will help him become who he already is." She looked up at my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, your son knew you well enough to predict that you would challenge his decision. He took the time to explain why your traditional advantages, financial stability, a large home, conventional family structure were not what Tommy would need most." Mom's face had gone pale while Dad sat rigid in his chair. More significantly, Judge Weaver continued, "Mr. Mitchell demonstrated knowledge of circumstances that apparently even Tommy's current guardian was unaware he knew." She turned to another page. Mr. Mitchell wrote, "Amy told me about Sarah's fertility struggles, her miscarriages, and how those experiences ended her engagement. Sarah could have become bitter about her inability to have children. Instead, she chose to dedicate her life to caring for other people's children. This makes her not less qualified to be a mother, but more qualified." The courtroom was completely silent. I felt exposed knowing that my most private pain was now part of the public record. But I also felt vindicated. Jake had known about my struggles and had seen them as strengths rather than failures. What strikes the court most powerfully about this letter is Mr. Mitchell's insight into why his sister was the right choice for Tommy specifically. He didn't choose Sarah despite her challenges. He chose her because of how she'd handled those challenges. Judge Weaver set the letter down and looked directly at my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell," your son wrote, "my parents will say that Sarah is selfish for not having children, that she's focused only on her career, that she doesn't understand real family responsibility. But they don't know that Sarah tried for years to have children and suffered multiple pregnancy losses. They don't know this because Sarah chose to protect their feelings rather than burden them with her pain. That selflessness is exactly what Tommy will need." Mom's hand flew to her mouth, and I saw tears in her eyes for the first time since the hearing began. Dad looked stunned, as if he'd been physically struck. "The irony here," Judge Weaver continued, "is that you've spent months arguing that Sarah lacks the experience and emotional maturity to raise a child, while she was quietly demonstrating both by caring for Tommy successfully for 4 months. She turned to Emma. "Ms. Anderson, your brother also anticipated your involvement in this custody dispute. He wrote, Emma will argue that her experience as a mother makes her the logical choice. But Emma parents her children like projects to be perfected. Tommy has been through enough trauma. He doesn't need to become someone's achievement. He needs to be loved as he is." Emma's face flushed red, but she remained silent. The court notes that every expert who has evaluated Tommy's current placement has reached the same conclusion. He is thriving under Sarah Mitchell's care. His teacher reports improved academic performance and social adjustment. His therapist notes significant progress in processing grief and developing secure attachment. The court-appointed evaluator found a child who feels safe, loved, and understood. Judge Weaver picked up another document from her desk. Dr. Hoffman's evaluation included this observation. Tommy's relationship with his Aunt Sarah is characterized by mutual respect, genuine affection, and age-appropriate boundaries. He feels heard and understood by her in ways that he does not experience with other adult family members. She looked around the courtroom, making eye contact with everyone involved. The petitioners have argued that love alone is insufficient. To raise a child, that practical considerations like financial resources and family structure must take precedence. But Mr. Jake Mitchell understood something that this court finds compelling. For a traumatized child, emotional security is the foundation upon which all other forms of stability must be built. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Judge Weaver's tone suggested she was moving toward a decision, but I couldn't tell which way she was leaning. The court also notes the concerning nature of some of the pressure that has been brought to bear on both Tommy and his current guardian. Dr. Hoffman's report indicates that Tommy feels anxious about adult family members who continue to question his clearly expressed preferences. A 7-year-old child should not be made to feel that his own feelings about his living situation are invalid or unimportant. She looked directly at my parents. The court is particularly troubled by evidence that financial threats have been made in an attempt to influence this custody decision. The disinheritance letter submitted as evidence suggests that this custody dispute is about more than just Tommy's welfare. Henderson stood up. Your Honor, my client's estate planning decisions are... Mr. Henderson, please sit down. I'm not finished. Judge Weaver's voice carried a tone of authority that brooked no argument. What this court sees in the evidence before it is a child who has clearly communicated his preferences, a guardian who has demonstrated competence and love, and extended family members who seem more focused on what they believe should be best for Tommy than on what Tommy himself is telling them is actually best for him. She opened Jake's letter one final time. Mr. Mitchell concluded his letter with these words: Sarah sees Tommy as a gift, not a burden. She will help him honor his parents' memory while building his own future. She will love him unconditionally, which is the greatest gift any parent can give a child. Please don't let family politics or conventional thinking override what is clearly best for my son. Judge Weaver closed the letter and looked up at all of us. The court finds that Mr. Jake Mitchell made a thoughtful, informed decision about his son's guardianship. The evidence shows that this decision has resulted in positive outcomes for Tommy, who is thriving under Sarah Mitchell's care. Most importantly, Tommy himself has consistently and clearly expressed his desire to remain with his current guardian. She paused, and the silence in the courtroom was deafening. Therefore, the court denies the petition for custody modification. Tommy Mitchell will remain in the care of his aunt, Sarah Mitchell, who will retain full legal guardianship as originally specified in his father's will. The relief that flooded through me was so intense, I thought I might pass out. Maria squeezed my hand, and I heard a soft gasp from someone behind me, whether it was joy or disappointment. I couldn't tell. Furthermore, Judge Weaver continued, the court orders that all parties respect Tommy's placement and cease any actions that might create anxiety or instability for him. This child has been through enough upheaval. He deserves peace in his current home. As the judge left the courtroom, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. Tommy would stay with me. The life we'd built together had been validated not just by the court, but by his father's words speaking from beyond the grave. Jake had known this day would come, and he'd given me the most powerful gift possible. The truth about why he'd chosen me, and the certainty that his decision had been made with full knowledge of what Tommy would need to heal and thrive. The custody battle was over, but more importantly, the truth about our family dynamics had been revealed. My parents now knew about my fertility struggles, about the pain I carried silently for years while they judged me for my choices. Emma had heard her brother's assessment of her parenting style read aloud in open court as we gathered our papers. And prepared to leave, I realized that while I'd won custody of Tommy, we'd all lost something else. The comfortable illusions that had allowed our family to function while avoiding deeper truths about love, acceptance, and what it really meant to put a child's needs first. The letter arrived 3 days after the custody hearing, delivered by regular mail in my mother's familiar handwriting. I found it slipped under my apartment door when Tommy and I returned from celebrating at his favorite pizza place, our small victory dinner for just the two of us. "What's that?" Tommy asked, noticing the envelope in my hands. "Just a letter from Grandma," I said, tucking it into my purse. "Why don't you get ready for your bath while I look at it?" I waited until Tommy was safely occupied with his toys in the bathroom before opening the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery, the kind Mom used for formal correspondence. "Dear Sarah," it began, "your father and I have spent the past few days thinking about everything that was revealed during the custody hearing. We owe you an apology that is long overdue." I sat down heavily on my couch, not sure I was ready for whatever this letter contained. We had no idea about your fertility struggles or the pain you endured during those years. We realize now that while we were criticizing you for not having children, you were privately grieving the children you had lost. We should have been supporting you instead of judging you. The words were carefully chosen, formal in the way my parents approached emotional topics. But there was something genuine underneath this stilted language. Jake's letter forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our family. We realized that our love has often come with conditions and expectations that were unfair to you. We see now that you have been carrying burdens we didn't even know existed, while we were focused on the children and grandchildren we could see rather than the daughter who was quietly suffering. I thought about all the family gatherings where I'd smiled and deflected questions about my personal life, protecting them from knowledge that might have made them uncomfortable. I'd chosen their peace over my own need for support, and Bade interpreted my silence as indifference. "We understand if you cannot forgive us immediately. We understand that our opposition to your guardianship of Tommy must have felt like a final rejection in a long series of disappointments. But we want you to know that we were wrong, not just about the custody situation, but about you." The letter continued for another page, detailing their commitment to respecting my role as Tommy's guardian, in their hope that we could rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty rather than assumptions. "We would like to be part of Tommy's life, if you'll allow it. We would like to be better grandparents to him and better parents to you. We know we've lost your trust, and we're prepared to spend however long it takes to earn it back." It was signed by both parents, their signatures careful and deliberate at the bottom of the page. I folded the letter and set it aside, feeling a complex mixture of relief, anger, and cautious hope. An apology was a start, but it couldn't erase years of feeling unseen and misunderstood by the people who were supposed to know me best. The phone rang while I was helping Tommy with his bedtime routine. Emma's name appeared on the screen, and I almost didn't answer. "Sarah? I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to say some things." "Okay," I said, settling into the chair beside Tommy's bed while he arranged his stuffed animals. "I read Mom and Dad's letter. They showed it to me before they sent it. And I realized I owe you an apology too, probably a bigger one than theirs." Emma's voice sounded different, smaller, less confident than usual. "I've been thinking about what Jake wrote about me, about how I parent my kids like projects. And the horrible thing is, he was right. I've been so focused on having the perfect family, the perfect children, that I forgot they're actual people with their own needs and feelings." She paused, and I could hear her crying softly. "I was jealous of you, Sarah, not just about Tommy, but about everything. You've always been the one people admired for your kindness, your dedication, your ability to care about others. I got the grades and the achievements, but you got the love. Real love from people who saw who you actually were." "Emma, let me finish, please. I need to say this. When Jake died and Tommy needed someone, everyone immediately thought of you. Not me, even though I'm the one with kids. Not Mom and Dad, even though they raised 3 children. You. because people knew you would put Tommy first, not yourself. I watched Tommy carefully arranging Peanut the elephant next to his pillow, his nightly ritual that helped him feel secure. I convinced myself that I was fighting for Tommy's best interests. But really, I was fighting against the idea that you might be better at something than I was. And the terrible thing is, I was willing to hurt Tommy to protect my own ego. He's fine, Emma. He's resilient. But he shouldn't have had to be. He shouldn't have had to defend his choice to live with someone who loves him. I made a traumatized child feel like his own feelings didn't matter, and I'm ashamed of that. There was a long pause while we both processed the weight of her admission. David's been telling me for months that I was being petty, but I wouldn't. Listen, I thought he just didn't understand family dynamics. But he understood something I didn't, that fighting over a child isn't the same as fighting for a child. Emma, I appreciate you calling. There's something else. I found some things in Mom's attic last week while I was helping her organize. Report cards, school photos, certificates, yours and mine from when we were kids. She had them all saved, but mine were in this beautiful scrapbook with dates and descriptions, and yours were just dot loose in a box. She took a shaky breath. I don't think they even realized they were doing it, but they've been treating us differently our whole lives. I got the attention and the praise, and you got the criticism and the expectations to be more like me. That wasn't fair. I thought about those old report cards I'd found in the attic. The evidence of a childhood spent always being compared to someone else's standards. I want to do better, Emma continued. With my own kids, with Tommy, with you. I want to actually deserve the family I've been taking for granted. After we hung up, I sat with Tommy while he fell asleep, thinking about forgiveness and family dynamics and the ways people could change when forced to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. The custody battle had ended, but in some ways, it had just begun a different kind of reckoning, one that required all of us to examine the roles we've been playing and decide whether we wanted to keep playing them. 2 weeks later, my parents visited our apartment for the first time since the hearing. They brought a coffee table book about trains, Tommy's current obsession, and sat awkwardly on my couch while he showed them his latest Lego creation. "This is really impressive, Tommy," Dad said, and for once his praise sounded genuine rather than performative. "You're quite the engineer." "Aunt Sarah helped me with the hard parts," Tommy said, "but I did most of it myself." "That's exactly how it should be," Mom said, catching my eye. "Good helpers know when to step in and when to let you figure things out on your own." It was a small moment, but it felt significant, an acknowledgement that I'd been doing things right, that my instincts as Tommy's guardian were sound. Over the following weeks, the family dynamics slowly began to shift. Emma started calling not to question my decisions, but to ask how Tommy was doing, to share funny stories about her own children, to invite us to birthday parties and casual gatherings without any underlying agenda. "Madison keeps asking when Tommy can come over to play," she told me during one conversation. "Not to stay, just to visit. She misses having a big cousin around." "That sounds nice," I said. "Tommy's been asking about the kids too." "Really?" "I mean, I know they're not super close, but Emma, they're family. He wants to know his cousins, even if he doesn't live with them." It was a simple concept, but one that had gotten lost in the custody battle. The idea that love wasn't finite, that Tommy could care about his extended family while still choosing to live with me. My parents' efforts were more tentative, but equally genuine. Dad started sending Tommy postcards from his business trips, just short notes about interesting places he'd visited. Mom called once a week to check in, asking about school and friends. And whether Tommy needed anything. "How is Aunt Sarah doing?" She asked Tommy during one of their conversations, putting the call on speaker so I could hear. "She's good. She's teaching me how to make pancakes from scratch, and we're reading this really long book about a kid who goes to wizard school." "That sounds wonderful. You're lucky to have someone who takes such good care of you." "I know," Tommy said matter-of-factly. Dad picked her special for me. The reference to Jake still brought tears to my eyes, but they were different tears. Now grateful rather than grief-stricken, proud rather than devastated. The most surprising change came from my extended family. Aunts and uncles who had remained neutral during the custody battle began reaching out, sharing their own observations about the situation. "I always thought you'd be a wonderful mother," my Aunt Carol told me during a phone call. "The way you were with all the kids during family gatherings, so patient, so present. I'm glad Tommy gets to experience that every day." "We should have spoken up during all that legal nonsense," my Uncle Jim added when he and Carol visited. "It was obvious to anyone who watched you two together that you belonged with each other." These conversations helped me understand that the custody battle hadn't just been about my immediate family's opinions. There had been a wider network of people who'd observed my relationship with Tommy over the years and had their own thoughts about what was best for him. 3 months after the hearing, Emma invited Tommy and me to Connor's birthday party. It was the first extended family gathering since the custody dispute ended, and I wasn't sure what to expect. "Are you nervous?" Tommy asked as we walked up to Emma's front door. "A little," I admitted. "Are you?" "Nah, they're still our family, right? They're just different now." His 7-year-old wisdom continued to amaze me. He understood instinctively that people could change, that relationships could be repaired, that families could evolve into healthier versions of themselves. The party was surprisingly comfortable. Emma had clearly talked to her children about treating Tommy as their cousin, not as someone they'd almost lost to a custody battle. Madison and Connor were excited to show him their rooms, their toys, their latest achievements. "Tommy, want to see my new bike?" Connor asked, and they spent an hour in the backyard learning tricks and racing around the patio. "He seems happy," David said, joining me as we watched the children play. "He is happy. He's learning that you can love lots of people without having to live with all of them. Emma's been working on that lesson too," he said with a gentle smile. "Learning that love isn't a competition." As the afternoon wore on, I found myself in conversation with my parents, talking about Tommy's school progress, his interest in science, his plans for summer camp. Normal grandparent conversations, without the underlying tension that had characterized our relationship for so long. "He's really thriving," Mom observed, watching Tommy help Connor with his new bike. "You've done such a good job with him, Sarah." "We've done a good job together," I corrected. "He's taught me as much as I've taught him. That's what good families do," Dad said quietly. "They grow together." Later that evening, as Tommy and I drove home, he was unusually quiet. "Everything okay?" I asked. "I was just thinking about something Madison said. She asked me if I missed living with a regular family, and I told her I do live with a regular family. We're just smaller than other families." "What did she say to that?" "She said her mom told her that families come in all different sizes, and ours is just right for us." "Emma said that?" "And then she said that sometimes the best families are the ones where people choose to love each other extra hard because they want to, not because they have to." I felt tears building in my eyes. Emma had not only learned to accept our unconventional family structure, she was actively helping her children understand and celebrate it. "Do you think that's true?" Tommy asked. "That we love each other extra hard?" "I think that's exactly true," I said. "I think your dad knew that's what you'd need, and that's why he picked me to take care of you. And I picked you too," Tommy said. "Even when all the grown-ups were being weird about it, I picked you." As we pulled into our apartment complex, I realized that the family reckoning had accomplished something I hadn't expected. Not only had we preserved the life Tommy and I had built together, but we'd also created space for healthier relationships with the extended family who had initially opposed us. The apologies had been important, but the changed behavior was what really mattered. My parents were learning to love without conditions. Emma was discovering what it meant to support rather than compete, and everyone was accepting that sometimes the best decisions look unconventional from the outside but feel perfectly right from the inside. Tommy had gained not just a stable home with me, but also a network of family members who were finally seeing him and me clearly. It wasn't the family structure anyone had originally envisioned, but it was strong, loving, and honest in ways our old dynamic had never been. The adoption ceremony took place on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after that terrible phone call from Denver. Judge Weaver had agreed to officiate the final proceeding that would make Tommy legally and permanently my son, not just. My ward. Tommy wore his best shirt, a blue button-down that he picked out himself because it matches your work scrubs. Mom! He'd started calling me Mom about 3 months earlier, casually and without fanfare, as if he'd been testing the word to see how it felt. The first time he said it, I cried happy tears in the grocery store checkout line. Are you ready for this? I asked him as we sat in the courthouse waiting room. I've been ready forever, he said with the confidence of an 8-year-old who'd learned that his opinions mattered. I just want it to be official so people stop asking me questions about it. Maria Santos had handled all the paperwork, which had been surprisingly straightforward once the custody battle was resolved. With no opposition from family members and a clear record of successful guardianship, the adoption was essentially a formality, but it was a formality that meant everything to both of us. Sarah and Tommy Mitchell? The clerk called, and we walked, hand in hand, into Judge Weaver's chambers. She smiled when she saw us, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her during any of our legal proceedings. Good morning, you two. Are you ready to make this official? We're ready, Tommy said solemnly, then grinned. But we're already a family. This just makes it so nobody can take me away anymore. That's exactly right, Judge Weaver said. This ceremony doesn't create your family, it recognizes the family you've already become. The proceeding was brief but meaningful. Judge Weaver spoke about the legal responsibilities of adoption, the permanence of the relationship we were formalizing, and the rights and obligations that would now be ours by law rather than just by love. Tommy, do you understand that Sarah will now be your legal mother, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails? Yes, ma'am. She's been my mom for a long time already. This just makes it official. And Sarah, do you understand that? You are taking on the full legal responsibility for Tommy's care, education, and well-being until he reaches adulthood? I do. And I promise to love him, support him, and help him become the person he's meant to be. Judge Weaver signed the adoption decree with a flourish, then handed us the official certificate. Congratulations, Mitchell family. May you have many years of happiness together. As we left the courthouse, Tommy studied the adoption certificate with the same careful attention he brought to everything important in his life. Look, he said, pointing to our names listed together. Tommy Mitchell, son of Sarah Mitchell. That's really us now. That's really us, I agreed. We planned a small celebration lunch, but first we had one more stop to make. Tommy had asked to visit his parents' gravesite, which we'd done only once before, shortly after the custody hearing ended. The Denver cemetery was quiet on this Tuesday morning, with autumn leaves scattered across the well-maintained grounds. We walked together to the spot where Jake and Amy were buried side by side, their headstones simple and elegant. Tommy had brought a letter he'd written the night before, folded carefully in his jacket pocket. Can I read it out loud? He asked. Of course, sweetheart. He unfolded the paper and began to read in his clear, serious voice. Dear Mom and Dad, today I got adopted by Aunt Sarah, which means she's my mom now too. I know you would be happy about this because Dad picked her special to take care of me and she's been doing a really good job. He paused to wipe his nose, then continued. I still miss you every day, but I'm not sad all the time anymore. Mom, I mean Aunt Sarah, but also Mom now helps me remember the good times we had together, and she never tries to make me stop missing you. She says it's okay to love you and her at the same time. I felt tears building as he read, struck by his ability to articulate such complex emotions. I'm doing good in school and I have friends now, and I learned how to ride a bike without training. Wheels, Mom taught me how to make pancakes, and we're reading this really long book series about wizards. I think you would like her even more now than you did before. He folded the letter carefully and placed it next to Amy's headstone, then stood quietly for a moment. I love you, he said simply. And I'm going to be okay. As we walked back to the car, Tommy slipped his hand into mine. Do you think they're proud of us? He asked. I think they're incredibly proud of you, I said, and grateful that we found each other. The celebration lunch was at Tommy's favorite restaurant, a family place with excellent chicken fingers and a dessert menu that included ice cream. Sundaes with enough toppings to satisfy an 8-year-old's imagination. We'd invited Mrs. Chun, who had become like a grandmother to Tommy, and Maria Santos, who had become a friend. To the Mitchell family, Maria toasted with her coffee cup. May you continue to prove that love makes a family, not genetics or convention. To Mom, Tommy added, raising his chocolate milk. The best mom a kid could ask for. Mrs. Chun dabbed her eyes with her napkin. Your father would be so proud, she told Tommy. He chose exactly the right person to love you. That evening, Tommy and I worked together to hang his adoption certificate on the refrigerator next to his latest school artwork and the photo from our courthouse ceremony. It looks official now, he said with satisfaction. It was always real, I said. This just makes it permanent. Good, because I never want to live anywhere else. As I tucked him into bed that night, Tommy asked the question that had been on my mind too. Mom, what happens now? I mean, we're officially a family. We live in our home and all the grown-up stuff is settled. What comes next? I thought about his question, about the life we built from tragedy and the future we were now. Free to create together. Now we just keep being a family, I said. We keep learning about each other. We keep making memories. We keep growing together. There's no drama left to solve now. We just get to enjoy being us. That sounds perfect, he said, settling back. Against his pillows with Peanut, the elephant tucked under his arm. It is perfect, I agreed. It's exactly perfect. As I turned off his bedroom light, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. A year ago, I'd been the family disappointment, the childless daughter who was accused of being selfish. Tonight, I was a mother, legally and completely, to a child who had chosen me as surely as I had chosen him. The adoption certificate hanging on our refrigerator was more than just a legal document. It was proof that sometimes the most unconventional families are the strongest ones, that love really is enough to overcome any obstacle, and that the people who are meant to be together will find their way to each other, even in the most heartbreaking circumstances. Tommy was right. We'd been a family for a long time already. Today had just made it official. And tomorrow we'd wake up and continue building the life that Jake had envisioned when he trusted me with his most precious gift, the chance to love his son unconditionally, forever. 1 year later, I stood in my kitchen making Thanksgiving dinner, our second annual celebration as an official family. Tommy, now 9 years old and taller by several inches, was carefully arranging place cards around our dining table, his tongue poking out in concentration just like his father used to do. Mom, should I put Grandma and Grandpa next to each other, or do you think they'll argue about the football game? He asked, holding up 2 handmade cards. I think they can handle sitting together. I laughed. They've been married for 38 years. They're used to disagreeing about sports. Our apartment had changed significantly over the past year. We'd moved to a larger 2-bedroom place in the same complex, giving Tommy his own space while keeping us close to Mrs. Chun and the neighborhood we'd grown to love. His room was a wonderful chaos of books, Legos, soccer trophies, and artwork, the room of a child who felt secure enough to spread out and make his mark on the world. Dining table was set for 8, Tommy and me, my parents, Emma and David and Madison and Connor. It had taken time to reach this point monthly family dinners that started awkwardly but gradually became comfortable, then genuinely enjoyable. We'd learned to navigate our new dynamics, to appreciate each other's strengths rather than focusing on our differences. The turkey smells really good, Tommy said, checking the oven timer. Do you think Uncle Jake and Aunt Amy would be proud of our cooking? I think they'd be proud of everything we've built together, I said, pulling him into a quick hug. Your dad always said the best families are the ones that help each other grow. The first guests to arrive were my parents, carrying flowers and a bottle of wine, looking more relaxed than I'd seen them in years. Dad's relationship with Tommy had blossomed once he stopped trying to be an authority figure and started simply being a grandfather, someone who taught him card tricks and told stories about the old days. Something smells amazing in here, Mom said, giving us both hugs. Tommy, did you help with the cooking? I made the cranberry sauce all by myself, Tommy said proudly. And I only spilled a little bit. That's more success than I had with cranberry sauce when I was your age? Mom laughed. I think I spilled more than I saved. Emma and her family arrived a few minutes later, the children immediately gravitating toward each other with the easy familiarity of cousins who saw each other regularly. Madison and Connor had become genuine friends with Tommy, not just relatives who tolerated each other during family gatherings. Aunt Sarah, Tommy said you're teaching him how to drive, Madison announced, causing the adults to laugh. Just the lawnmower at the hospital picnic, I clarified. And very slowly, with lots of supervision, can you teach me too? Connor asked. Hopefully. When you're older, Emma said. Much older. As we gathered around the table, Tommy insisted on saying grace a tradition he'd started the previous year. Thank you for this food, and for our family, and for Mom who takes really good care of me, he said solemnly. And thank you for Dad and Amy watching over us from heaven. And please help the Detroit Lions win at least one game this season, because Grandpa gets really grumpy when they lose every week. Amen to that, Dad said with a chuckle. During dinner, the conversation flowed easily between Tommy's school adventures, Emma's new job promotion, Dad's upcoming retirement plans, and Mom's volunteer work at the community center. We'd become a family that actually enjoyed spending time together, rather than one that gathered out of obligation. Tommy, tell everyone about your science project, I encouraged. I'm building a solar-powered car, he explained excitedly. Mom's helping me with the electrical parts because she knows about medical equipment, and Mr. Johnson next door is helping with the engineering stuff. That sounds incredibly advanced, David said, impressed. When I was 9, my science projects involved volcanoes made from baking soda. We did one of those too, Tommy said. But this one is more fun because I get to use real tools. After dinner, while the adults cleaned up, the children settled in the living room to work on a puzzle of family tradition that had emerged organically over the past year. Watching them collaborate, I marveled at how natural their relationships had become. He's really thriving, Emma said quietly, joining me as I loaded the dishwasher. I mean, he was always a great kid, but there's something different about him now. Different how? More confident, I guess, more secure. He knows he belongs somewhere, and it shows. I thought about Emma's observation as I watched Tommy explain puzzle strategy to his younger cousins. She was right, he carried himself differently now than he had during those first uncertain months. The anxiety about being moved or taken away had disappeared, replaced by the quiet confidence of a child who knew he was loved unconditionally. Sarah, Mom said, joining our conversation, I wanted to give you something. She handed me a manila envelope, worn at the edges and labeled in her familiar handwriting. What is this? Open it. Inside were photos, report cards, and certificates all. Mine, from elementary school through nursing school graduation. But these weren't the loose documents I found in the attic months earlier. These were carefully preserved, organized chronologically, with Mom's notes about each achievement. I found these when I was going through old boxes, she said. I realized that I'd been saving them all along, just not displaying them the way I should have. I wanted you to know that we were always proud of you, even when we didn't show it properly. I flipped through the collection photos of me receiving awards, report cards with teacher comments about my kindness and helpfulness, my nursing school graduation picture where I looked so young and hopeful. Mom, it's an apology, she said simply, and a promise to do better going forward. As the evening wound down and family members prepared to leave, Tommy made his rounds for goodbye hugs, collecting promises for next week's activities and extracting commitments for future adventures. Grandpa, you promised to teach me how to change a tire next weekend, he reminded Dad. I'll bring my tools, Dad confirmed. And we'll start with something simple, like checking the air pressure. Aunt Emma, are we still going to see that new movie on Saturday? Absolutely. Madison's been talking about it all week. After everyone left, Tommy and I sat on the couch looking at the framed photo we'd taken earlier our second annual Thanksgiving family portrait. This one more relaxed and genuine than the previous year's careful arrangement. "Do you think this is what Dad imagined when he picked you to be my mom?" Tommy asked. I considered his question, thinking about Jake's letter and his insight into what Tommy would need to heal and thrive. "I think your dad knew that we'd figure out how to be a family together," I said. "He probably didn't imagine all the specific details, but I think he knew we'd find our way." "I like our way," Tommy said contentedly. "It's not the same as other families, but it's perfect for us." "It is perfect for us," I agreed, Dot, as we cleaned up the last of the Thanksgiving dishes. I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. 2 years ago, I'd been sitting alone in the same kitchen, wondering if I'd ever have a family of my own. Tonight, I was a mother, a daughter who'd reconciled with her parents, a sister who'd found her place in the family hierarchy, and a guardian who'd proven that love really was enough to overcome any obstacle, the woman who'd been called selfish for naught. Having children was now raising a child who brought joy and purpose to every day. The family that had been fractured by misunderstanding and judgment had learned to love more honestly and accept more completely. Tommy was thriving not despite our unconventional family structure, but because of it. He'd learned that families come in all shapes and sizes, that love is a choice people make every day, and that sometimes the best gifts come wrapped in the most heartbreaking circumstances. "Mom?" Tommy said as we turned off the kitchen lights. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Thank you for fighting for me, for us." "Thank you for choosing me," I replied, "for teaching me that I was always meant to be your mom." As we headed toward our bedrooms, I caught sight of our reflection in the hallway mirror, a mother and son, tired after a long day of family celebration, heading to bed in the home we built together from love, determination, and the wisdom of a dying father who saw more clearly than anyone else what his son would need to heal. We'd come full circle from that terrible phone call 2 years ago, but we'd emerged stronger, wiser, and more grateful for the unexpected gifts that can arise from the deepest grief. Tommy had taught me that motherhood isn't about biology or timing or conventional preparation. It's about showing up with an open heart and refusing to give up when things get difficult. I taught him that families aren't just born there. Chosen, nurtured, and built one day at a time by people who commit to loving each other through everything life brings their way. Tonight, as we fell asleep in our respective rooms, we were exactly where we belonged, home, together, forever.